All right, good morning and welcome. We're going to call this regular meeting of the DCTA Board of Directors to order. We do have a quorum. Let's see, next up we have invocation. Cesar, would you mind?
Oh, no problem. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of having the company of all of us here. We ask that you help guide us as we make important decisions about the Denton County Transportation Authority. Provide us with your wisdom and your discernment. I ask this in your name, amen.
Amen. Allison, would you mind the flags?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible.
Thank you all. Paul, what have we got today for introductions?
We have representatives from our team at Lochner, our program management consultants for the A-Train, including Mr. Gary Thomas, who's going to help with one of our briefing items.
Okay, great. And next up, we've got public comment. So public comment, this agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the DCTA Board of Directors on any agenda items or other matters relating to DCTA. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or scandalous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Citizens who are not able to participate in person must email their comment to kmorris-perkins@dcta.net. Do we have any public comment? All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Board, do we have any questions or requests to pull items? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. Regular agenda, item 1, discuss update on A-Train enhancement program and project delivery alternatives. This is a discussion item, and we have Austin Frith, our Vice President of Planning and Development.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We are going to review some A-Train topics today, so we're excited to move this program along. So the first slide you all have seen before. This is our path forward to our program that includes Corinth, 15-minute headways, downtown Carrollton, and also our increasing of our service hours for the alignment of the train. As you can see in the green boxes, we are focused on our curb and speed upgrades, which I'll brief here in a minute. And then also downtown Carrollton is in the bottom green box with the base track improvements, EATC improvements. Those are the things that we're going to need to do to help out with the service hour, increasing those service hours throughout our schedule. So this plan is still intact, and we're moving towards getting some of these items completed. So we also briefed this earlier this fiscal year, our initial work plan for the A-Train program management consultant. So our goal here within task order 1 was to increase runtime in both directions. So this first task order included validating the simulation modeling for corridor improvements. We also confirmed that the speed changes we're proposing to make will be achievable. And then we also looked at our schedule impacts and what it would take to recommend adjustments to this schedule and or end of the line decisions. Yes, sir.
On that previous slide, so how much of that is doable within what we've learned about our track versus having to change the geometry?
So we have a slide upcoming that'll show you what the design findings were.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think this was a previous one where we had planned what we think would be achievable. We'll go through in detail.
Yeah, this is the one that basically created about $12 million in anticipated cost.
This one essentially is just showing where we thought we could increase the track speeds over the corridor.
To get us where we
Correct.
wanted to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And I think you might be referring to the initial LAN assessments that the curve and speed improvements were going to be more expensive than what we're seeing right now.
Right.
So,
But so in a roundabout way, for us to get this, that's what that as 12 million estimate came from.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, so part of task order one was also validating the model. So back in 23 and 24, there was a rail inspection vehicle that records the track shape and elevation. We compared those measurements against the original design plans to see if anything changed over that time span. We also looked at how long each curve was to make sure that we can obtain that speed and the banking of the super elevation was met any requirements. We also looked at the speed to make sure that it met ARIMA standards, to make sure the curves weren't too sharp, make sure the train can safely handle the additional speeds and along those areas that were increasing. So we did do that, and essentially the findings were that the curves, most of the curves could meet the standards for higher speeds without any major modification. A few curves do need some modifications in raising the track banking to reach those speeds. And then we also have some nearby road crossings that will have to be upgraded as well. But all in all these recommendations and the curves that we're going to adjust, they're going to stay within all the federal limits that are required. So this is the updated curve and speed design. So not much has changed from what I previously shared with you, but this just shows you where along the alignment of the rail we're going to be able to increase speeds. As you can see, some of the speeds are going to be reaching 60 where they already are at close to 60. Some of them are going to go up to 55 from about 40. So we are excited about increasing some of these speeds in some of these areas with minimal construction and really just some enhancements to the speed codes we have in place. So when we talk about speed and curve and speed coordination moving forward, so we do have some tasks that we're going to look at achieving here. The first one is a project administration coordination task with Lochner. This is going to help us coordinate with the FRA as well as cities on some of these preemption. So preemption is essentially the train coming up to a crossing, the time it takes for that train to slow down. So we're going to be working with the city. Lochner is going to support us working with the cities to see if we can improve that at any point. I talked about the FRA coordination, and then they're also going to support us in overseeing the phasing of this construction to make sure that we're coordinating with any affected cities and any affected crossings. And I'll speak to a little bit about more of that coordination with Town of Hickory Creek here in a minute. On the Rio Grande Pacific side, they're actually going to be doing the physical construction work and the signal enhancements. So as you can see, we're adjusting super elevation about 4 curves. We got some panel replacements at 3 locations. There are some ballast and resurfacing that will have to be done. Primarily speed code increases are going to happen at those 8 segments I previously showed you. And then finally, we'll do some field testing, commissioning, and then make sure we're locked in with the FRA on the final approval. Timeline. So right now we have validated the estimate from Rio Grande for the construction work. So in the coming weeks, we're going to be coordinating with DART and GG&O on this project to make sure that they're aligned. We're going to look to come back for board approval for this scope for Lochner and Rio Grande and issue a notice to proceed Rio Grande, hopefully in the early fall. We have procurement materials happening early fall to late fall, and then hopefully start construction sometime in November timeframe. One thing I want to mention here is the Town of Hickory Creek has a Denton County road project that's happening along Carlisle Drive. So what we're trying to do is coordinate with the Town of Hickory Creek and that project so that we're not essentially closing Carlisle Carlisle Drive twice when we come back and do the construction we need to do on our project. So we're trying to synergize the two projects to fall in line with each other. So we'll be working closely with the town of Hickory Creek on that, to make sure that we're closing at once for both projects essentially. And I think that is it on the curve and speed. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So this time next year, we anticipate to have what level of improvement?
So one of the upcoming board briefings we would like to share with you all would be essentially what we foresee in the schedule improvements. I think we had initially said 3 to 4 minute improvement over the span of the schedule. So in the next board meeting, we're going to present some recommendations to what we do with that extra time we're going to save with this increased speed. And then from that, we'll have an outcome of, okay, this is what we can do to the schedule, or we can keep the schedule as is and have more time to recover on the ends of the line.
Thank you. Other questions?
Issues with shared track. Have those issues been cleared? Have I got it?
You might be talking about the concurrent operation of freight and passenger. That would be an issue once the hours of service are extended. But for right now, we're just talking about improving speed through the current schedule. And so we're not at that point yet, but we will be here pretty soon. At the end, there's a list of to-dos and that'll show up on that to-do list.
Sounded like it'd be pretty big.
It's going to be an important thing for us to consider, for sure.
Thank you.
Welcome. Other questions? Think we're good.
Okay. Well, at this point, I'd like to welcome Mr. Gary Thomas to talk about program delivery. Gary?
Thanks. Thank you, Austin, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Chair Gilmore, board members, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Gary Thomas. I'm the transit and rail market lead for Lochner Engineers. And once upon a time, I had the opportunity to be part of the DART organization for a few years. And so as I talk about alternative delivery today, part of it is certainly from, what we gather from different projects around the country, what we know. And then for me personally, a little bit about it is my experience at the agency from an owner's perspective. And I'll be happy to share with you some of those things that went very well. And I'll be happy to share with you some of those things that went not so well at all. And I think, of course, that's how we learn and how we try to avoid those mistakes as we go forward. But to start with, let's start off with the terms that we're going to be using and talking about. Traditional delivery, design, bid, build, that's the one that we're most familiar with. And as we go through the presentation today, I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of each one, the pros and cons. As we go through the list, there is not a silver bullet. Some of these work better than others, depending on what your goals are. And that's really, as we've talked about, what is a recommendation, we really have to start is what your goals are, what do you want to achieve, what are your tolerances as it relates to risks, schedule, and budgets. And so we'll go through all of that as we go through the conversation. Design build, many of us are familiar with design build. I'll talk a little bit more about that. The challenge right now with design build is a lot of contractors are stepping away because design build actually pushes a lot of the risk onto the contractor and away from the owner. So it's harder and harder lately to get contractors to actually bid on design build projects. Progressive design build is a much more collaborative way to do business. In other words, how can we actually work together, have meaningful conversations as we go through the process? CMGC, construction manager, general contractor, and construction manager at risk, CMAR. Those two, there are certainly some nuances between those two, but for all intents and purposes, they're used interchangeably by many people throughout the industry. And then, of course, you've got your innovative delivery methods: design, build, finance, design, build, operate, maintain, design, build, operate, maintain, and finance. So as you look at schedules and how these come together, design, bid, build, it's a linear process. You hire your designer goes through the design process. Then you have a procurement process, and then you do construction. Design, build, the procurement process is actually longer in this case because you have to give the contractor time to actually put together some preliminary engineering documents so they know what they're actually bidding on. In many cases, stipends are required to incent the contractors to provide those bids. And then you've got a concurrent design and construction process. So you can save some schedule. In that particular case, CMAR, again, it's a very collaborative approach. You bring your contractor on in a phase one kind of approach, generally at the 30% level. And what that allows you to do is get a lot better constructability reviews and better insight into your cost. You work through it with your contractor in that phase one, and then you get to this point right here where you need to come up with a guaranteed maximum price, or GMP, and that's a negotiated price in many cases. And then you go into the construction process, and we'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of how that works. And then progressive design build is actually more like a CMAR than it is a design build. You still hire one contractor, where CMAR, you're hiring your engineer separate from your contractor. Progressive design build, you're hiring one team, like design build, but it's a more collaborative approach through the initial phases from 30 to 100%. In other words, if there's issues that haven't quite been addressed or worked out, this allows you to work through those issues together. And then again, at the end, you're again negotiating a guaranteed maximum price with the contractor as you move forward. Things to consider as you go through this deliberative process: project size and complexity. Some of these delivery methods work better than others, and I'll get to that in a second. Legislative regulatory requirements: can you do it? Do you have the legislative authority to do the different things? Risk tolerance, how tolerant are you to things that might come up in the process? Cost and change management, and this is really more about change management. While there is some cost savings in different delivery approaches, it's really more about cost management, cost control, and change management. Schedule sensitivity. Whether it was good or bad at DART, we said we're going to open this, as David certainly remembers, we're going to open this on date certain and assess our, we worked to that date. So we didn't allow a lot of flexibility in the schedule in those particular cases. Local market knowledge, what that really means is who's going to bid on these projects? What is that local market look like? How do they feel about the different delivery methods? Are you going to, when you put this out on the street, are you going to get some interest? Are the contractor community going to step up and say, yeah, we want to do that. We want to be part of this DCTA project. The desired amount of owner influence and control. Are you comfortable with turning it over and letting the contractor team do it and not seeing it again, except maybe periodically, checkpoints, or do you want to be part of that process as it goes through the process? And then owners' resources and capabilities is the last. Now, a little bit different way to look at this: design, bid, build, ordinary projects, low complexity, uncertainty, typically the required method, moderate tolerance. And I won't read the entire schedule with you. You've got that, or the entire matrix with you, but a similar approach to what we just said, maybe a little more categorically aligned with the different approaches. Another way to look at it, if you're looking at it from a risk perspective, owner's risk, and this is a spectrum from design, bid, build, finance to design, build, finance, and maintain to design, bid, build. Owner's risk is greatest on the design, bid, build. It's the least on the design, bid, build finance, because again, this side, you're turning it over, that side, you're really kind of in charge of every piece as it goes along the spectrum. The contractor's risk is the least on the design build because as we've all seen, they get a set of plans. They're going to work to that set of plans. If something is not in the set of plans, the contractor says, not there, we need to fix it. Then you get to where the owner's control is greatest. Again, it's on the design bid build side. The contractor's control is going to be greatest as you come to this end of the spectrum. So again, as you think about where you are, where your goals are, how involved, how engaged you want to be, this kind of gives you an idea of where you are in the spectrum between design build finance and design bid build on the other side. So this is maybe the case study. And when I was at DART, as we went through our build out of the light rail system, we started with what are our goals? Obviously, safety and quality were top of the list. Cost savings, everybody wants cost savings. In this case, it was change management. And I'll talk about that in a second. Expedited schedules, and maybe not necessarily so much expedited, but schedule certainty in our case. And then coordination with other third parties, utilities. You know, many times if you talk to, and many of you have been involved in construction projects, you know that where you really get bit are on utilities and property. Those are the things that maybe you didn't know everything there is to know about. All the utilities underground, or maybe you don't have all the property tied up. And those are things that are going to take the longest to take care of as you go through this process. So getting that addressed up front is incredibly important. And again, our board, when I was at the agency, said small and MWB participation was very important. In other words, building capacity in North Texas was critical. Now, as we started this, starter system actually opened not in 1997, but 1996, June 1996. It was 1,000 degrees that day, but a good day nonetheless. It was a design bid build project, and that was essentially the starter system was red blue. It went up to just north of downtown Dallas. We had, I think, around 16 construction contracts in that particular segment. It was an $800 million program, and it went reasonably well. Obviously, many of us remember that. We then did the extension, the first extension in 2001, the red and blue line extension that went to Richardson, Plano, Garland. That was also a design bid build process that opened in, as I said, 2001. And that's when it started hitting us. We needed to come up with a better way of doing this, because if you look down here, our change orders on design bid build are 20%. Now, that doesn't, as we talk through this, and as you can see, when we went to CMGC, our change orders dropped to 12%. We went to design build, our change orders dropped to 2%. That doesn't mean it necessarily costs less to do design build. It just allowed us on design build, you knew what you're getting at the front end. The contractor bid it, the change orders were less. And when we did the design build on the Orange Line to DFW Airport, great construction team, great design team. But we also had incentives in that contract on how they were going to work with everybody, because sometimes when you have a design build contract, they can kind of run over everybody along the way. In this particular case, we had incentives, and the incentives were actually determined by the community, by the city, how well they worked with the community, how well they worked with the city. And in that particular case, our change orders were low, but again, your cost certainly was at the front end. The green line was CMGC. Again, a great example. We brought the contractor in early to get the constructability, to get the surety in cost. In theory, what you're supposed to do is bring them in at 30%. We were late to the party. We brought them in at 65%. The idea is that you go through you have open book, open conversations around the table. In 2007, 8, 9, when we were doing this, it was pretty new. And contractors and engineers weren't used to, quite frankly, weren't used to sitting around the table, collaborating, talking about in open fashion what the costs were, where the problems were, how they're going to be dealt with. So that took a little bit of encouragement to get everybody to do that, but it ended up in a really good place. And the challenge is when you get to the end, again, in theory, you've worked all the way through this together. And when you get to that negotiated guaranteed maximum price, there ought not to be any surprises, right? Because you marched along together. In that particular case, there were no surprises. It went great. We got the GMP price, and of course, everything got built just like it was supposed to. As I mentioned, Orange Line was design build. Then the Blue Line extension, South Oak Cliff 3 extension was again a CMGC. That was one where we brought the contractor on at 30%. We got to the negotiations, the GMP negotiations. We could not get a negotiated price. And
I think we're good. I don't think we
Okay.
need to go through every single one of these. I love you, Dart. Great.
no,
We're not Dart.
oh, I know that. I appreciate that. Now, that wasn't the purpose. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about the different ways to do it and the different things that could come up, regardless of who you are. And, you know, I talked to agencies all over the country, what's working and what's not working. Getting to a GMP is, I'm talking to an agency right now. They're at that GMP level. They're not there. They can't get it. So as an agency, you have to decide, are you going to off-ramp them and take the schedule hit, or you're not? So as we go through the process, the steps, understanding what your goals are for implementation, understanding that you're not Dart, I appreciate that. Understanding what your funding sources and timing are, understanding schedule requirements, understanding the project size, and then of course, the contracting community's interests. And so as we work through this, those are the things that we'll be working with the DCTA staff, and of course, influenced by your input, and come up with a delivery method for the construction projects moving forward. You bet. Happy to answer any questions.
When you look at a project, my question on this one, my background with large projects, you know,
Yes, sir.
50 million and above for our municipal projects. Louisville's done a pretty strong job with CMAR. I don't know if the other two cities that we have here represented, if you guys are familiar with that process.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Denton often uses CMAR as well.
Yeah, yes. I don't know if a $3 million project necessarily lends itself to a CMAR process, but I love the collaboration of that side of the world. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know you can. I'm just, at some point, it doesn't necessarily. But I do think, as we're talking about extension down into Carrollton, and I mean, we've got 9 crossings, we've got the station down there. I think that section of the process absolutely would create the need for that side.
Yes, sir. And that's a great point to just underline and make really clear. Our assumption here is that the curve and speed improvements would be performed by Rio Grande Pacific. It's really more of a heavy maintenance project than a construction project. The reason this conversation is so important is because the decisions that we make on what our delivery method is drives what our first design task order is going to look like. Like Gary said, if you do too much design on the front end, you lose some of the benefit of these alternative delivery methods. And so what Austin, I think, is going to come back up and talk about what we've got scoped currently for the first task order. And then is there a desire maybe to de-scope it even just a little bit more because we think we might go CM and risk or something like that. And we're just looking for feedback at this point, no decision, just want to understand your comfort level overall with these alternative delivery methods. And
I expect some feedback from the engineer sitting to my left.
Okay, since you called me out. I'm very familiar with CMAR. I used it personally on several municipal buildings in my previous life. I have learned to like the concept of bringing in the construction team. They give you they have a different perspective than your designers typically. They understand it. Constructability issues much better, and bringing those guys in sooner than later, it will help you eliminate unknowns. What both of these methods, what Gary was talking about, both of these methods, it's not so much reducing the cost, it's really uncovering what the true cost is. A political body hates, my experience, they don't like the surprise of, we were told this is going to be X, and then 6 months later, it's X plus Y. And the construction perspective kind of helps you get to what the true price is. If you're told up front it's X plus Y, well, that's the price. You feel a lot more comfortable. That the other way, you feel like you're kind of being, someone's pulling one over on you.
My favorite is 2X.
Two is that, you like two X?
Or X plus Y plus Z plus A. No, I like I like the CMAR approach because number one, the collaboration it allows, but also it allows the buyer, if you will, a little bit more leverage in terms of, you know, when the construction manager is at risk, he's got an obligation to try to work harder to be on schedule and on budget. And because he's absorbing that risk, whereas so it provides us a little bit more leverage to make sure that we're getting the best deal and the best timeline possible.
So I think there's a little difference, subtle difference between really where you talk about is just two delivery methods. It's either CMAR or you go one more step and you go to progressive design build. And they're just, you know, there's I think CMR you have, and that's really a policy decision from this board. You keep a little more control versus when you move to the progressive design build, you lose a little bit more. But you know, that's what that is. What comfort level are you at? I'm very comfortable with CMAR. I've used that a lot. Never used progressive design build, so I don't have any firsthand experience on that.
Yeah, I've, seen CMAR being used at the city of Denton. I'm also not as familiar with progressive design build. I would be interested in what our staff has to say about, their level of involvement in these different like alternative delivery methods and what helps them feel most comfortable, I guess.
I think in terms of my priority, it's avoiding the unknown of here's the change. We thought it was going to be X and now it's going to be Y. Another thing that's really important, I think, for us at this stage is really to understand what is the value, what is the cost of the program overall. You know, we did this first pass at it using the LAN study from a couple of years ago. That was really just a desktop review. That's where we got to the $260 million number or something like that. At this stage, what we would like to see, what I would like to see is us understanding with at least a 15% design across the whole program, what do we think is a better working estimate? And then we may differentiate between initial design on the overall program versus the initial design of the downtown Carrollton segment. If you wanted to do something that was more towards getting a 30% design rather than a 15. And so that's what Austin's going to present is we've got a scope of work for task design 1 that is 15% of the overall corridor, 30% on the downtown Carrollton, and then going to whatever delivery method you all wanted to do, whether it be design, bid, build, or some alternative method. But from this conversation, it sounds like the appetite might be skewing more towards just do 15% overall. The downtown Carrollton package gets broken out, and then we start that procurement process through one of these alternative deliveries. I want to avoid what you want to avoid, which is we thought it was going to be X, but now it's going to be Y. And you have to have some level of design across the whole program to know how much money we have to go and find and all that sort of stuff. So
I think we would be doing you guys a disservice if we told you we wanted to do DBB or CMAR. But I think what you're hearing from this board is that we are much more interested in having a collaborative engagement with a partner. Now, if my only concern was splitting the Carrollton component off, as you mentioned, my only concern with that is, can you use the current speed program to kind of build the relationship with those vendors
Mhm.
that just slides into the Carrollton piece? Is there an opportunity there where you can make sure, otherwise, do you get 30% down with the Carrollton piece and you're like, this is really not working with you guys? I don't know. I don't know if there's an angle there or not, but that'd be my only concern, is that we might lose an opportunity to get a comfort level with a vendor or with a partner, that we kind of could test the waters with the small bit and then move into the big bit.
Well, and that's a really good conversation for us to have as well, because right now, like I said, the curve and speed improvements is really a heavy maintenance type of project
Mhm.
that Rio Grande Pacific could do.
Yeah.
And now that we've extended their agreement, we're with them for the next 5 years. Certainly they could bid as a subcontractor for the downtown Carrollton or any of these other things, that come up. So I don't see a huge risk
Okay.
in that overall. And then I also, and remember that we broke this thing into these phases because they do build upon one another, and we're avoiding rework or throwaway work
Right.
and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So.
So, but am I misstating the board's pleasure on this one? Does that give you guys what you need?
It does. And I think that the time and intentionality we have at this phase of really understanding what's important to us and how we step through this could save us a lot of time and trouble down the road. So we appreciate the chance to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, appreciate the feedback and the overview on how we can go about it. Cause I, the only guy here that can really speak with direct experience to this. I appreciate that he leans towards what we do as electeds. I know for me as an elected, having these touch points throughout the process on CMAR has been wonderful. And it even helps me deal with, okay, yeah, we've had a price spike because we were building through COVID on one of these. So how do you manage that? And it felt like we had a lot more input on the project as we went through. So great. Anything else on this one?
No, so we'll bring Austin back up to finish other stuff on the rest of the site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna go into talking about what we hinted towards a little bit on the task order 2, which is essentially advancing the design and engineering component for the extension of downtown Carrollton, as well as the 15-minute headways across the corridor. So within the scope, initially we were thinking at 30% design for that downtown Carrollton extension. It would include the station design, drainage, any bridge and wall layouts we need to do, and utility coordination. For the 15-minute headways piece, we would get to about a 15% level design to give us a refined cost estimate, as Paul mentioned, including passing sightings, any utility conflicts identified, and then of course drainage. We also want to include in this scope environmental documentation so that we could potentially look at starting to apply for federal support for some of these projects. Also including in here is RTC simulation so we can confirm operationally 15-minute service, including the fleet, staffing requirements, operational requirements that would be required to support that element. Including also program management with stakeholder coordination, and then construction support with RFI or change order support for both curb and speed enhancements project, as well as whatever we may come up within this 30% level design. So that's the high level, the task order 2 scope. So we essentially have been working with Lochner on this. We've got initial cost estimates back from them. As you can see, the initial fee right there, just upwards of 7 million on that. We in further discussions with them, aligning to what we feel we need to get moving immediately is that 30% Carrollton and 15% for 15-minute headway. This original scope had 30% for 15 and Carrollton. So we've reduced that scope to just get a 15% for that 15-minute solution. We've also eliminated any field heavy work that would be premature without some of the questions that we don't have answers to right now. We also we want to make sure that we're aligning our funding constraints with what we feel is a good solution moving forward. Again, this still meets the FTA expectations for the environmental review, allows us to advance the grant readiness, and gets us in a better position to move the project along at a good pace.
Really quick, Austin.
Yeah.
So based on this conversation, I think there's another alternative for us to bring back to you, and that is 15% overall.
Mhm.
That'll give you the full spectrum. That'll allow you to address allow us to address whatever delivery method you all are ultimately that we decide on. So, again, we'll have another conversation on this in July, another in August, and we'll be working on that additional estimate here in the coming month.
Question, or comment, having worked on the other side, 15-30%, they're kind of nebulous numbers.
Right.
What you're trying to get to is, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, you're trying to get to a design, I call it, conceptual design, to a point where you can bring in the contractor that they could help. And sometimes there are portions that are more complicated that you need to put a little more effort in. So I'm not so much tied up on this is 30, this is 50,
Right.
this is just 15, maybe this is 25. You're not that precise.
Yes.
So it's just
We
not.
do this
that
work with
precise.
bulldozers, you know?
They do.
Yeah.
So, as for me, not speaking for the whole board, just for me, if it's, as long as it's less than 4 points, a little bit less than 4.6, but I don't want us to shortchange it.
Right.
And then we don't get enough of the answers up front, and you're not getting anything. You're not providing the true value. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
That's a good point, and I agree with you that the percent design is nebulous, so that's what we're trying to list out what we would get and what we wouldn't get. And so, we'll have that for you when we lay out this other alternative.
So what I heard you say is you're good with 28% on that side and 17% on the other.
That's what I wrote, 27.
Yeah, I mean, I think budgetarily, if those fees make sense and can get us the information we need to be able to move down the road, I absolutely.
Yeah, I think for the most part, from what I'm seeing and I've heard from LEN, we've got a bridge there that probably needs to be looked at, make sure it can still sustain this traffic, as well as this crossings in Carrollton that have to be maybe upgraded to quiet zone. So, yeah, to your point, Cesar, like, I think we got to get to a point where we have all those answers, make sure the cost estimates reflect it. So when we look at the schedule, we've broken it down into each of the program elements. We talked a little bit about the curve and speed, where we're at with that. Downtown Carrollton, as mentioned, task order 2, we'll look at revising that to come back to you all with another option there. As you can see, when we look at each of these projects, we've included the different elements or the different delivery methods and potentially what timing of that may look like for each of those. So it just gives you at a high level the different delivery methods, where we're projecting those happen, and some decisions that will have to be made in the months coming forward. Some other things of note here, the operating schedule is not included on these projects yet. So we anticipate a parallel task order with Lochner to look at the additional service hours, how we can coordinate with DG&O, and either dual equipment the PTC or transitioning over to their PTC system, so we can operate in that 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. timeframe. So that'll be a parallel task order that's happening concurrently with that task order 2. So there is a decision point on this, on the PTC, that will have to be made at some point in order to achieve this 15-minute headway solution. So all in all, last bullet here, these results are additive to the program. So as you see the station at Corinth, sits down here, it's kind of on its own path. But similar elements for each program or each project will have to be completed. And then moving forward with next steps. So on the curb and speed, we're going to continue coordination and procurement efforts with RGPC, Rio Grande to get their authorization letter. Continue coordination with FRA on that project specifically to make sure we're all in line with their requirements. We do want to look at operating options and cost impacts, like we had mentioned, what happens to that improved runtime savings? What do we do with it? So we'll be bringing that to the board with some options and decision. And then initiate this development of task order 3 for project admin support, coordination with the cities for these crossings and preemption needs. On the track extension to Carrollton, we're going to reconvene with the city of Carrollton to kick off this downtown Carrollton design for this next task order and then advance it to the next phase. And then interagency coordination, we are currently in discussions with DART regarding the track lease renewal that is up, I believe, in 2030. And then we'll begin the development of task order 4 for that task that allows us to operate additional service hours and look at what that means to our operational impact and cost. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on
Comments, input?
Good presentation.
Yeah, looks well thought out. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to regular agenda item 2. This is to discuss our proposed fiscal year 2026 operating and capital budget and reserve policies. I've got our CEO, Paul Christina, and Jane. Jane, I can never pronounce your name properly. I'm sorry. Polarowitz. See, if I didn't have to read it, I'd get it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to invite Jane up right now, and we're going to jump into our proposed fiscal year 2026 budget. We've got a run of show that'll have just about everybody on the executive team up at some point to provide some component of this. So we'll pardon our shuffling while we do that. But other than that, Jane, go ahead and take it away.
So good morning, Chair and Board. Thank you for your time, and excited to present to you our FY26 proposed budget, proposed in capital. Today we'll go over the proposed budget along with capital, and then in July we will do the long-range financial plan with you. But we will talk a little bit about what the future looks like for us and tap into long-range financial plan just a little bit today. This will be our overview as it's outlined for our budget workshop today. So we'll start with our executive summary here, go over a budget calendar, some performance, some high-level budget information for you to kind of paint the picture, and then we'll get a little more granular for you as to where all these numbers kind of line up so you can get a really good feel for what we're looking at for the budget for the next year. And then we'll move into the revenue and then each department, so mobility services, bus operation, rail operations, work through quite a few expanded level projects. We'll have several people come up to present those as well. And then move into the G&A department, and the capital, we'll cover capital projects. You'll kind of already heard about them already, so we'll recap that for you. And then move into debt services and then an organizational structure review for you. All right, for the budget calendar, so we actually kick off our budget preparation review in April, and we work on that through July. So departments are working on their budgets in April. And then in May, we're having our internal kind of budget workshops, pulling all of our budget together to bring us to today to present it to you as a proposed budget. And then we will, like I said, come back in July with the long-range financial plan as well. And then we'll have our formal budget hearing and adoption if everything goes super smoothly in August. If we need a little more time, we can actually do that in September as well. So our formal budget adoption will either happen August or September, and then we're in budget maintenance mode after that from October through September, just administering the budget, working on any maybe minor changes that might need to happen. And then we'll be submitting our budget for the GFA award by November or December, probably November if we adopt in August. And now Paul will go over some high level performance level numbers with you.
Thank you, Jane. So we'll start out just kind of looking at overall where our agency is in terms of performance for our major key performance indicators, safety, service, and ridership. First, and this is in your monthly board packet, so this should look familiar to you, but first on the Go Zone side, from a safety perspective, we measure FTA reportable incidents. Those are valued at more than $25,000 or cause a vehicle to be towed or cause a person to be injured. Fortunately, we are trending at about 0.25 incidents per 100,000 miles year over year versus our performance last year at 0.3. Suffice to say that through our procurement process for the next version of the Go Zone contract, we spent a lot of time with VIA and River North Transportation writing performance specifications that will allow us to drive this number even more. On the bus operations side, you see that we're at 0.86 for the year, but if you look at the green bars, those are non-preventable accidents, those being accidents where the bus operator was not at fault. And so while those things are unfortunate, we still have to count those. And so those things are driving our year-over-year performance at a higher rate than we were at the end of the year last year. And we stay focused on understanding what's the root cause of those things and how can we eliminate them from our system. The really good news so far this year is that Rio Grande Pacific on the rail side is pitching a perfect game so far. If if the home team at the baseball game has a scoreboard that looks like that, you're really happy.
You don't talk about the no hitter.
That's right. Yeah, well, we have to because safety is really important. But this came out of a lot of really good conversations, somewhat intense conversations last year. And to Rio Grande's credit, they listened, took action, and we've got good results going on so far. On the service performance side, I'm going to show you this again. This shows up in your board packet. Access on-time performance, doing great overall in terms of how we're delivering that service. But one of the things you may start seeing and hearing is that our KPI is 99% is awesome. But what we know is the demand for this service is increasing, and we have to find opportunities to get more people into the schedule. And so that's a conversation Lisa and I are having about how do we get more people into the schedule with the capacity that we have. And that driving a more aggressive schedule may cause that number to tick downward, but we've got some room to play with. On the fixed route on-time performance side, we've continued our steady progress from where we were at the fall of last year when we had insourced NTMC. Remember, we started the school year in the mid-70s to low 80s range. And to the credit of Lisa and our operations team, we've steadily improved that performance over time and are going to maintain that momentum through the summer and into the fall. Go Zone seat unavailability and wait times. We've been talking about this offline with many of you as we look at the intermediate service plan that we did last year, where we took Go Zone capacity out of Denton, put it into Louisville and Highland Village, and said, let's figure out how we can balance KPIs across all these and have equity between the zones, so on and so forth. And what happened between March and April was we were seeing capacity sort of default to Denton, wait times and seat unavailability in Louisville, or at least seat unavailability in Louisville, Highland Village was lagging Denton. And so we talked to VIA, on a daily basis, a weekly basis, how can we correct this? And we began to turn the corner with the May performance. Now, that gets us where we want to be, or starts to get us in the direction we want to be for seat unavailability. But if you look at what's happening with wait times, our wait time in Denton is just over the 24-minute mark. The KPI is 24 minutes. And so we have to monitor that as well. If you remember when you approved the intermediate service plan, you said if we needed to have 300 additional hours a week to make sure KPIs are balanced, you're willing to do that. We have not released that capacity so far. We're still working with the capacity that was originally granted. And so we're going to watch these numbers, especially as the school year starts in Denton, because that always spikes demand and causes KPIs to go in different directions. So, and then let's look at ridership. So overall year over year, 10% lagging from last year, which was an all-time record. If you remember what we said over and over again, we're running the system wide open. We've got fixed route running. We've got Go Zone service running on top of that in Denton, and we're doing everything that we can. And we did really, really well. The primary driver for that 10% decrease is the UNT service. If you see that it's down about 25% year over year. We don't have the exact causes why, but what we've heard anecdotally is an enrollment is down at UNT. That drives obviously ridership when there's fewer students serving. But the bright spot here, kind of looking behind the numbers, is the Connect service is up 57% year over year. We believe that's a direct result of the board's decision to invest in frequency, add those 18 stops. And this shows us that if we run the buses frequently and we run them on time, people are going to use them. And we know from all the work that we did last year that if we can run the buses at a good capacity, meaning they're full or mostly full, then it's the most cost-effective way to move people. And so we're seeing those results there. Beyond that, the A train up another 9% year over year. We have been at double-digit ridership year over year for the last 4 years. We could still end the year there. The summer's always a lagging time, and we know that the A train picks back up. Go Zone, negative 3.3%. I really call that flat. It could be largely driven by, we've got a fixed capacity of service. Every van moves about 3.5 trips an hour. And when those vans are moving more in Louisville and Highland Village than they are in Denton, it's going to generate fewer trips. That's just as a result of density and things that we know about the system. So no alarm there.
Paul?
Yes, sir.
Just real quick, I was gonna ask a question about that, because I know that there are members of my city council who would notice this and want an answer.
Yep.
Could it also be attributed to that 56% gain on the Connect side?
In Denton, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that is true. The Go Zone system runs a higher passenger per hour in Denton than it does in Louisville, Highland Village, just because of the density that's in Denton that's not.
But those adjustments to the bus routes, putting more people on buses, getting them out of Go Zone.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. But what we're seeing in Louisville and Highland Village, and we briefed this a couple of months ago, was ridership in those cities up overall. And net, we've gotten more people on more trips on the system as a result of the change.
Right. Okay.
Great point. The other thing that I'll point out here, so the graph to the lower right is showing you Connect 3, 6, and 7 ridership since fiscal 2021. You see the big jump in the far graph on the right. The graph on the lower left is looking at all of our University of North Texas routes, and you're looking at fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2025, trying to explain that negative 25% decrease. You see significant drop in Discovery Park ridership. We had a lot of construction on that side of town that certainly impacted, but also things you hear in the news about student visas and all that sort of stuff also impacts enrollment and that impacts ridership. And so the reality is it all ties together. So with regard to, as we step into this fiscal year 2026 budget, wanted to give you a big picture about where we've been and where we're going. What you see is ridership growth year over year, small budgetary increases, 3 to 4%. We're maintaining the budgetary increases in the 3 to 4% range because every year, you know, that our Rio Grande Pacific contract has an increase, the Go Zone contract has an increase, so on and so forth. But ridership growth, again, has gone to the negative, and that's because of the things that we talked about before. I could foresee us getting more and more into a conversation in fiscal year 2026 about cost-effective ridership being one of the ways that we measure our success, not just the raw ridership number. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the UNT contract conversation here in just a little bit. So tailwinds for us, things that are helping us do really well as an agency. A-Train providing double-digit year-over-year ridership growth, very favorable Connect performance. And then we've seen from Intermediate Service Plan Phase 1 that our methodology works. The things that we thought would happen have been happening. Headwinds on ridership, UNT enrollment's down. It's the biggest component of our service, but we also have to think about cost effectiveness, our annual service cost increase, and then we're going to talk about sales tax revenue from last year to this year and how it's really stayed kind of flat, which is a new place for us to be. So with that, I'll bring Jane back up and we'll continue.
All right, so as I mentioned, I will go over some high-level slides for you. I know, like, when I read a book, I start at page 1, and I like to read all the way through, but I'm going to give y'all kind of the end of the story. And the end of the story is, as Paul said, we really have been looking at our revenues very, very closely this year and trying to hone in on where we feel like we would land on revenues for FY26. And sales tax is very level, and you'll see that throughout. And so with that being said, we have tried to really, really paint a very conservative budget for this next FY26 fiscal year. So I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record probably, but sometimes repetition helps. But I'm going to kind of reiterate some different things that are happening within the budget that you might hear more than once. Any questions you have, I'll hold at the end for any questions, but if you have any questions in the middle, feel free to ask. What you're looking at here is a 4-year outlook for revenue and expenses. So pretty high level. On the top of this chart, you're looking obviously at the revenues, and then kind of midway through, we start to hit the expenses. So we start off with our federal, state, and grants, also very level to last year at 14.8, where FY 25 was 14.7. And then those years out, 27, 28, 29, those are just predictions that we're making. Nothing super solid yet, but relatively solid. But when we come back in July, we'll have a very firm plan on our out years by looking at things like this, plus our long-range financial plan. But that 14.8 in federal grants really ties back to expenses that we have that are known for FY 26, both operationally and capital-wise. For our operation would be things like bus salaries and wages, and then capital, we have some projects that we're able to tie back some of our expenses to that we know that we will be able to draw down on FY 26. 14.8 is not the only money that we have in grants, but it is the money that we know we have expenses on for FY 26. And then sales tax at 41 is identical, as you can see, to FY 25. We thought we might bump that up a bit, but based on what we've seen to date, and sales tax is at 2 months in arrears, but what we're seeing to date is it's either very level or slightly less. So this year we're expecting to hit and hoping to hit that 41 mark. We're not comfortable going higher than that right now at this point, based on what we've been seeing about halfway through the year. Then our operating revenues, that's tied back to ridership and fiscal year expenses at 6.2%. So things like passenger revenue, contract revenue, those are the things that go into that. Then our non-operating revenue, this is one we did take up to 3.7. It's from investments that were done a few years ago. Thank you, David. And we're seeing that those actuals have been coming in quite nice. And so we're trying to more align our actuals with what we have been able to see through that investment income. We expect that for this particular year for it to come in somewhere between 3.5 and 4 million. We've had budgeted in 25 of, I think, 2 million, 2.1 on that. So we're trying to align that a little bit better. So that was a nice one to be able to move up and feel comfortable about. And then I think you might remember from the last couple of years where we talked about TAM, which stands for Transit Asset Management. I always call it our piggy bank. It's money that we're setting aside to be able to do things like fleet purchases and rail major maintenance. We started to kind of tease that and talk through that last year with y'all. We will definitely be doing that again. We actually have fleet purchases in the budget for this year again. And then as we lay out the long-range financial plan for the next 3 to 10 years, you really start to see why it's so important that we're doing this saving of money in order to be able to afford rail cars down the road, buses, infrastructure, the new building, things of those nature. So that gives us total revenue for this year of 69.5 million. Last year was 67.6, so a slight increase in revenues. Then we get into our operating expenses. So 54.4 are our total operating expenses, less the depreciation. That encompasses all things DCTA. And there's a lot more information that will show you what makes up that 54.4 number for this year. It is a slight increase of over last year, 52. It's about a 4.8% increase over the current year we're in right now. Debt service is contractual. It's at 2 million. Even that's the principal and interest payments. That won't change. And then our capital expenses, less our TRIP and less our TAM. Both TRIP and TAM are showed there, but this is capital expenses that we'll break out for you throughout this presentation and then recap it with you in the capital worksheet. But that 18.5 million is cash spend that we have in FY 26. So that is the money in projects that we plan to spend for the year. So that represents at this moment 18.5 million. EMS, the total expenses of 74.9, net cash excluding TRIP to 5.4, and then TRIP is just a number we've plugged right now. We basically, all I've done is plug in that 5.9 million number that matches this year. We know it won't be higher. We actually expect that number might be less, but we kind of plugged in the highest case scenario and then are building off of that, which is giving us a net cash impact of 11.3. And that was pretty fast, but any questions on that?
I guess the only piece of this is I don't have a recollection of what the full TAM reserves are, our net cash reserves. So being able to see that in this context helps at some point.
So one
I know
of
you're
the
gonna bring
things
that to us.
too, and we'll address it as well, but one of the things that you do have at your space is the capital worksheet. And so it will show you, I think we started it 2 years ago, and it shows you year over year how we are building that out and saving that money for the for the foreseeable future, for the next 5 years on the paper, but then beyond that.
Is the A-Train enhancement project, is any component of that in the, in this?
Yeah,
either the
so I'm
TAN
glad you mentioned
reserves
that.
or-
Out of the, and I hope I'm answering it right, but out of the 18.5 million, 8 million of that is tied back to the A-Train program and trying to get to the 15-minute headways.
Okay.
And then that other 10 million is made up of bus purchases, a refurbishing of a bus, IT projects, some bus projects, all are ELPs that we'll be discussing today. But yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Anyone else? So this next slide is the budget adjustment drivers for revenues and expenses. These are kind of our higher level, quote unquote, the larger numbers that make up that budget that you just saw on the first slide. So as it relates to revenues, our 1.7 for this year, last year was 1.6. So obviously very small increase. The GO zone at 950,000 is level. And then the other three, the rail bus and Collin County rides all have slight increases. We are just matching those to actual. So we feel very confident that we can hit those marks and be pretty tied in with them, not too above and hopefully not less. But 1.7 million is our passenger revenue number for FY 26. Then our contract revenue at 4.4 million is even to FY 25. It's the contract revenue for UNT, Frisco, Collin County rides, and our other smaller transit programs like Lyft and things like that.
That UAT number change as the conversation continues with UAT?
Yes, sir, it could, and I'm gonna address that.
Then sales tax revenue, as I mentioned, at 41 million, and just based on, like I said, everything that we're seeing in actuals is pointing us to this is the right number to utilize for FY 26. We project for this particular year will be between 40.7 and 41 million even. And so that's why we kind of landed on that number for FY 26. And then the investment income at the 3.5 is the money that was invested, I mentioned, where we're seeing nice actuals come in from that. And we're projecting to be between 3.5 and 4 this year. So we felt comfortable utilizing 3.5 million as our number for FY 26. And then the grant funding revenue is 14.8. That's broken out into operating and capital. So the capital grants represents 2.7 million of that, all tied back to projects and expenses that we have for the year. And then 12.1 for federal operating grants, all tied back to operational. It's our formula fund money that we have.
Question on the formula fund money. Have you adjusted that downward since UNT is not providing the same level of ridership that, and since they drive that number?
I
think maybe what you're referring to, the program dollars are generated, or they're provided by the feds based on ridership.
Right.
I know they do lag a couple of years, and
Okay.
we may be seeing an increase that's coming from the ridership growth that we've seen
Got it.
recently. So,
Okay.
but also to your point that if the UNT service continues to change and ridership drops, that will affect our programmatic funding. We're trying to understand of all the program and articulate really clearly of all the program funding we get from FTA, how much of it is associated with bus ridership versus all the other stuff that we do, so we can understand program dollars for bus versus expenditures and revenues from bus.
Yeah.
Okay.
For future conversation.
Yeah, the bus operator salaries and wages is a large part of that, but also GO Zone purchase transportation's a portion of that, Van Pool's a portion of that, Collin County Rides is a portion of that.
Yeah, I mean, my concern, as you probably can tell, is as we're having this conversation with UNT about what the actual costs are in their contract. Of course, their response, as it should be, is, well, we're bringing in this amount with ridership on federal grants to the agency. But as that declines, that puts us in basically doubling down. So that creates some complexity, I guess, in that conversation. So I hope we're working with them on that.
We are, and also to, again, try to paint the picture in advance of those conversations of the entirety of the bus operations budgeted $11 million. Well, the program dollars for that is 1 to 2 million, give or take. So how
Okay.
much of an impact is the program dollars versus
Yeah.
what the local sales tax brings to the table?
Super.
And this is all this all gets tied into a fair policy conversation also in fiscal 26. So we'll have fun.
Thank you.
Good questions. All right, now to the expenses side. So DCTA, we're one happy family now, right? And so it's just DCTA. We have salary, wages, and benefits at 15 million. That's a $718,000 increase to our current year. The reason there's that increase is we have a 3% COLA plan for every employee plus up to a 5% merit. That is planned in that particular number. And then our medical insurance, dental and health benefits, we have planned level to 25. There is a chance it might come in less. If it does, we'll come back to you in July and we'll adjust those numbers. But for right now, we used what we know as today, and we don't expect it to go higher than today. We think it potentially will either be the same or might be a hair less. There are no new positions in this budget being requested for FY '26. There were 3 in FY '25, just as reference. Then we have purchase transportation. That is the largest expense that we have at DCTA at 26.3. It includes, as Paul had mentioned earlier, the contractual obligations that we have. Primarily, Rio Grande and Go Zone are our 2 largest. And so rail is, the Rio Grande, I'm sorry, is at 12.9, and then the Go Zone at 11.9. And then some of the smaller ones under mobility is the service, 896,000, Collin County Rides is 330,000, and then a couple of the others, 260,000. So that's a 1.26 million increase to our current year. Outsourced services are 6.3 million. That's a $764,000 increase. That's professional services for computer and software maintenance. Those are going to tie into some ELPs that you're going to see coming up. And so that's why we have an increase in that. And then also there's a slight increase to add the office space next door that we've talked about in the last 1 or 2 board presentations. To bring on an additional office space. So through leases, we have a little bit of a dollar increase. It looks bigger when you look at the percent than it is in the dollars. And then material and supplies is a nice story to tell. It's a decrease. So we'll be at 2.8 million. The reason it is a decrease of almost $500,000 is we realigned fuel this year for both bus and rail to get them more in line with actuals. So our bus per gallon estimate is like $3.50 per gallon. And our rail per gallon estimate is $3 per gallon. So we wanted to get that a little bit tighter than we have now that we have a little more time under our belts to really watch that. Any questions on budget adjustment drivers? Okay. So this is the DCTA budget summary. This is just sort of going to show you the operational budget as a whole, especially on the left side it will. And so it's broken out into the demand response and fixed route, and then the different mobility services. So what we have for demand response is just over $1 million. That represents our access in Frisco, and then the fixed routes in our member cities. So just 1 million there. And the fixed route is about 5.4 million. That is going to be our UNT Shuttle, North Texas Express, and Connect. So that all the dollars that go into that, whether it be salary, wages, or operational, make up $5.4 million. And then when you get to the mobility services, so Go Zone is 12 million, followed by Collin County Rides, and then contracted mobility as a service are things like Vanpool, the Coppell Lift, and UNT Lift. And then bus admin and support is anything that supports the operation. So it could be the bus admin team, it could be supervisors and dispatch, the maintenance team, things of those nature. That represents 6%. And then A train is 16.7. That's all things for train. And then G&A is pretty much our office. So in those departments, making 11.3 for a total operating budget of $54.4 million for FY '26. And as I mentioned earlier, that's about a 4.8% increase over the current year. The capital budget, that's capital budget all in. So that's cash flow, that's TAM, that's projected trip at 28.2 million for the year. So we have a lot more information coming on that. And then debt services is that contractual number I had mentioned. It's 1.9. That's the principal and interest that we need to pay for the year. And then the bottom graph will show you the G&A as a percent to OpEx. So the OpEx we mentioned is 54.4. G&A, as you can see, is 11.3. So G&A therefore is about 20.8% of the overall operating budget.
A data point I'd love to see for future conversation is our G&A trend and where we are against what we consider peer agencies, or as close as we can get. I know we're never going to hit 12%, like some of the larger agencies, but we're not them.
Right.
So what is reasonable? What should we be benchmarking towards if we can? That's just, I know that's a lever that I can work with And it's a pretty good visualization of what our internal growth is.
Okay, yeah, we'll make a note of that and then we'll be able to, we could even bring it back in July for you to show you kind of how we.
Yeah,
compare
I don't have a number in my head.
Okay.
Of what I have in my head is, taxpayers demand, efficiency, and this is a number that they look at.
Okay. All right, this you can't read, but you do have a capital worksheet at your space, and that's coming up a little bit later on. But the key capital things that we just wanted to let you know about, like we had mentioned, A-Train has the A-Train curve speed and improvements, and then the design support for 15-minute headways. That is $8 million of the 18 million spend that we have. And then we actually have some other larger things like fleet purchase, 340-foot buses, a bus refurbished for the year that we're trying to take a bus, basically take it to its skeleton and bring it back as if it's brand new, but less than the purchase of a full bus. So we have that built into the capital budget. It's an ELP that all of these are ELPs that will be presented today. So you have a lot more detail from all the people that present those. And then some other bus capital projects such as push to talks and dual facing cameras. There's some IT projects that Javier will go over. And then major maintenance rail will be covered by Paul of where we land on that for the fiscal year. So there's a lot more specifics on that coming up. All right, this is the change in net position, net depreciation. And there's also, the next slide is going to be with depreciation. You do have both of them at your space if it's easier to look at that way or the screen. I'm going to do the one with depreciation because we don't build depreciation into too many other slides here. And we wanted to be able to paint that picture for you. But this is just going to be able to kind of show you, again, high level, all things budget on one screen, which is kind of nice. It starts with the revenues again that we've been talking about. So it's the passenger revenues and the contract revenues coming in at the $6 million, $6.1 million for the year. And then the next three sections down, you can see broken out. So you've got like G&A, bus operations and mobility over here. And then on the other side, that's going to be rail plus the non-operating revenues. So from here, so that I'm not a total broken record, I'm just going to hit the highlights for you so you kind of know what those are. So you can kind of see under G&A, utilities has a 46% decrease. That is really, all we've done is actually move the Cellco and Verizon into operations. It was 99% operational. Those are things like mobile phone, or I'm sorry, push to talks and mobile devices that are actually used on the buses and the rail. So we took that out of the IT budget because it didn't make a ton of sense there, and it was inflating G&A in a little bit of way it probably shouldn't have been, and move that into our fixed route and demand response budget. So we're actually going to see an increase there a little bit while we see this a decrease for G&A. And then the other one that looks like a big percent, but not dollar wise, is the leases, and that's to be able to add the space next door. So for G&A as a whole, again, very level, but those are probably two of the key areas that had caught my eye, at least when I was looking at it. And then when you get into bus operations, you will see the utilities there, 59.54 is a 59.54% increase. And that is, let me peek at that because I've forgotten what that is. Oh, yeah, the Cellco and Verizon. Yep. And then employee development looks like it's an increase. We've really kept employee development level this year. The reason that looks like it's an increase of 30% is because some of the employee development that was in operations moved to HR. So with our new ERP with Tyler, we try to quit dividing things across departments, because that way people have access to look at what their own responsibilities are. So same kind of with salaries and wages. We were splitting salaries and wages for certain employees across different departments. Where we haven't done that in Tyler, we try to keep that even. And then in addition, things that like Jackie was managing, we were trying not to spread like transit appreciation across 3 different areas for her. We were really trying to hone it in so that she could do her requisitions and things like that in one area. So some of the employee development we moved over into G&A so that it'd be one spot for her to be able to look, to be able to spend her money. So she wasn't looking 3 places to figure out how much money she had. So that's what that boils down to. And then mobility as a service, like I said, we realigned some salaries instead of splitting them. We just realigned them into one category. So that's why that looks like it's a decrease, but there's not any like position eliminations or anything like that. And then moving on over into the rail operations, you'll see The materials and supplies decrease of 27%. That is due to realigning the fuel per gallon costs to get it more in line with actuals. And so that gives us, for the change in that position with depreciation, a budget of 65 million, just over 65 million. And remember, the one without was 54. And then our net operating revenues and expenses and investment income, like we mentioned, has gone up to 3.5. And then we've kind of already talked about miscellaneous revenue is there. That 210,000 there is there because we have that 300,000 in contingency for insurance claims. When we get the money back from insurance, we put it into the miscellaneous revenue. So that's why there's $210,000 there. Any questions on changing that position before I move on?
So that's just a revolving fund, the miscellaneous revenue?
Um,
That's what essentially it's.
it's basically, it's really only there to be able to accumulate the revenues that come back from, it's always only insurance related. And so, yeah, that's what that's for. And it tends to stick about around that exact number, yeah. All right, so revenue, this is the pie chart that kind of shows you, well, it does show you all things revenue as a whole. Obviously shows you our largest revenue is sales tax revenue. So our total revenue for the year is 65.7. Sales tax makes up 41 million of that. The miscellaneous revenue, as I just mentioned, is to receive the money back from the contingency. Passenger revenues, all modes were 1.74. Investment income, we mentioned 3.5. And then contract service revenues, $4.4 million. And then it shows you where our capital grants and our operating grants land on that. And then this one will break it down a little bit more into the different areas of service. And so you can see bus operation revenues for demand response directly operated at $30,000, followed by the fixed route at 4 million, making our total bus operation revenues at 4 million. It's very, very slight increase over the prior year. And then mobility services, as I mentioned, GO zones level to last year based on what we're seeing. And then the other three have very slight increases to them, at least Collin County rides in the demand response do. No, they don't. I'm sorry. Collin County rides as mobility as a service. We actually brought down because we were seeing that those actuals were not coming in quite as high as we had thought they were. So we brought those down to the 28,000, and then the demand response we're at 420 this year versus 440 the year prior. We really are trying to line those up with, like I said, our actuals. And then rail service is a slight increase over last year. So that gives us the 6.1, almost $6.2 million of operating revenues for the year. Questions on that? And then this is the non-operating revenue. So I always kind of look at this chart like on the left half, and then I'll cover the right half with you, which the right half is all things sales tax. But the left half again is showing you all the different revenues such as investment income, miscellaneous revenue, sales tax, and the grants totaling the $59.5 million. And I believe covered all that I need to cover for that for the left side. Now the right side, what you're seeing there is a chart of the years of sales tax history. And you can really see in between 24, 25, and 26 where it really is leveling out from what we used to be able to see. You also will see, it's a lot of numbers there, but basically what that bottom chart is showing you is from October through March, the sales generated month, October through March. So right here, we'll have actuals. Those are real because we've received our sales tax back through, I believe, May. That represents December through May. And then these are projections here. And so basically what this chart is showing you is like we haven't adopted 41 million. We're hoping and expecting to land at 41 million for the year. And we're projecting 41 million for the next year based on everything that we're seeing from the comptroller's office and some reporting and data that we've pulled on that. Any questions on sales tax or any of that? All right. All right, so I'm going to kick it over to Paul, and he's going to cover the mobility services for us.
Thank you, Jane. And before I jump in this, Mr. Chairman, just as a scheduling note, lunch arrived a little early, so it's your pleasure. We could run through whatever time you want to and pause at any given point. So
Want to take a bio break here for about 10 minutes, grab a lunch and come back? Does that work for everybody? Great break point. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, sir.
We're gonna take a brief recess. We'll be back in about 10 minutes.
Very good.
EA team.
All right. So Jane gave you a pretty good overview at the front end, and so I'll be able to fly through these things pretty quick. When we talk about mobility services, we're talking about things like the Go Zone service and the things that are used to run our contract services operations. What you see here is not much change year over year, aside from the purchase transportation increase, which is really coming from the annual price adjustment for the Go Zone service and customer service. If you remember the new contract that you all authorized award of, which we're still working through terms and conditions and all that sort of stuff, but it's taking a 5% increase, and that's what you see in the variance on that slide. More on mobility services with regard to all those contracted services. We updated this slide just a little bit since the draft version that you got to add details around the Collin County Rides program, because we provided it for you on Frisco. We've got what's the cost of service for the taxi, for the Lyft, and then where's our administrative fee come in. We just wanted to make sure that was explicit for you here. But again, no major changes. We're going to be talking to all our contracted services cities over the course of the next 3 months to understand what their plans are for next year. We're not anticipating major changes, but if we see those, we'll bring them to you. If the budget's adopted and then a change is made, then we do the budget amendment. But the important thing is that we always look for what's the cost of service plus our administrative fee, so we protect our member city resources. On the details of the Go Zone service, you see here our fiscal year 2025 rate and how that changes for fiscal year 2026 to $44.95 an hour, about a 5% increase. I'm flagging for you max vehicle hours in the 2025 budget at 234. And then in 2026, you see it's 254.95. Not a real increase. That is showing you what is in the budget for that 300 additional hours per week that, again, we're trying to hold back and just balance the service that we have on the street with the capacity that we already have deployed. If we can continue and to maintain the status quo, the real budget number for fiscal 26 is going to look like that 234,000 hour number. Make sense? Okay. On the rail side, again, like Jane said, no major changes except you see the price increase for the Rio Grande Pacific contract. That contract has been executed for it to take us through the 5-year amendment. And as we've mentioned to you before, through that last Rio Grande conversation, the major components of the rail operations budget are shown here with regard to train crew hours, miles, all that sort of thing. One of the things Austin said we'll talk about next month is if we want to make the train run faster and try to get more trains turned on a daily basis, that is going to drive a change in crew hours and car miles, and that's going to cause operating costs to go up. We've got to paint that picture for you so you understand the operating cost implications of all of those things, and that'll come back in the July board meeting. Jane mentioned how we have been, over the course of the last couple of years, we understand more about what does it take in terms of fuel capacity to run the service. And so we had that dialed in pretty well on the train, but last year I think we were budgeted 450 a gallon because at some point fuel price increases were a real concern. We've been stable enough for a long enough time that we feel like $3 a gallon is a good number. And so that lets us have a tighter budget there. And then we introduced this topic to you a few years ago, that the railroad is a capital intensive operation, a lot of capital required in order to maintain a state of good repair on the rolling stock, on the signal systems, on the track ties and ballast, and so on and so forth. So we're providing you just an overall view of, since the train came online in 2012, how the $18 million of capital has been spent across all of those different categories. I would expect to see over the coming years that the rail vehicles, as they get a little bit older, that number starts to increase, and you'll see that show in the slide that follows. What I'm going to show you on the next slide after this one is how the rail capital item breaks down. And just know that the process by which we arrive at this program is asking our rail contractor, what does the train need in order to continue running and continue its reliable service? And they've provided us that view through fiscal 2030, which is the end of their contract. We go through the budgeting process by sitting down with them and really sharpening the pencil and saying, okay, help us understand the risk if we don't spend this recommended capital, and specifically, what is the risk to the on-time performance and the reliability of the train? So that allowed us to take the fiscal year 2026 number from initial first pass $5.5 million to what you see right here at $3.3 million. If you looked at last year's presentation, you would see a lot of the same things. We think about the train as a system of systems, and every one of those subsystems requires maintenance. So every year you're going to see brake overhauls. Every year, this might be, we're running to the end of engine and generator overhauls, air conditioning overhauls as the trains are still operating their original equipment. So 2.4 million on the vehicles. On the track side, we've had a higher grout injection allowance for crossings in the past, but we see our crossing condition is pretty stable going into this year. Grout injection is if the panels start to get a little wonky and people complain because their car bumps and jostles as they drive over it, we go in the ground and inject grout, just like it says, levels out the panels. It's cheaper than doing a crossing replacement. We've got a little allowance there, but one of our bridges over the Trinity River, the deck that is the surface that's holding the track is recommended for replacement. And so that's the number that you see there. And then on the signal side, these are all subcomponents of the crossing signals that are at all the different grade crossings that as they reach functional obsolescence and risk increases that parts are not going to be available if they break. We're trying to balance doing new components and then taking old components that maybe haven't failed yet and building a stockpile of spares so that at some point we can not buy as many pieces of signal upgrade equipment on an annual basis and just draw down the stockpile instead. So that's what you see there. And then signal house HVAC, those stainless steel boxes you see at grade crossings get really, really hot in the summertime. Lots of PTC equipment and things like that it can be temperature sensitive. So in an effort to prolong the life, we're trying to install HVAC units in those bungalows. Yes, sir.
So Paul, what this is basically, Rio Grande has given us a price for next year.
Correct.
So that's like the Trinity River Bridge deck replacement. They calculated out, this is the price, regardless of when we do it in 2020 in this next budget, it's still going to be this number.
Correct. So what happens is when the budget is approved, when this capital budget is approved in August or September, then these authorization letters start flowing from Rio Grande Pacific and it matches the price that's on here, and then they execute that work, and that's how we go forward. I'm going to, later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about capital requests, but I'm going to advance one of those right now, and that is this dispatch platform upgrade. So last year, you all approved $500,000 to start the project, and then another $300,000 this year. And this is upgrading the rail dispatch system that Rio Grande uses to maintain train control out of their headquarters in Fort Worth. The system that they're operating on currently, because of PTC, they have their proprietary system, and then they have this other system that was necessary to maintain the PTC compliance. That obviously makes it difficult for dispatchers to change track authorities on two different screens, not to mention the fact that that platform was becoming functionally obsolete as software continues to get old when it's installed in 2011, and now it's 2025. So you all authorized this project to begin. The project is well underway. We saw a demonstration of the new software just last week, I believe, and it's progressing as required. And so this last 300,000 will complete that project, and Rio Grande will be, and the A-Train will be in good shape to do dispatching moving forward. Any questions on the railroad? On the bus operation side, again, not much change year over year. I will point out outsourced services at the $224,000 increase. We've added a lot of technology to the buses with regard to our APCs and our signage and enunciators and all those sorts of things. So we make sure that we've got, and our Swiftly platform software overall. So we make sure we have money in the budget for those. But then also you see increase in legal fees for union grievances and arbitrations. Our operations team and human resources team done a great job of enforcing the standard of what our bus operator manual says is required to work at DCTA. That is primarily around things like on-time performance and the way that we treat our customers, those sorts of things. We have seen the ATU for the employees that they are representing on an individual basis challenge things through grievances, which leads sometimes to arbitrations. And so we have an active labor relations operation going on right now at DCTA. And the reason that's important is because every time, if ever that standard is to slip, and that creates a precedent that then makes the rules a little harder to enforce in the future. And so we've got a good relationship with the ATU. We've got a good relationship with our operators. Morale is high, but we need to be prepared to maintain that standard because that ultimately drives operating costs. On the fuel side for bus operations, again, we're trying to calculate fuel here based on the service miles that we expect. About the same as it was last year, maybe a slight increase because of the Connect 3 and 6 frequency increase. But the fuel operations budget at $3.50 a gallon, we feel like matches the reality that we've been seeing. And so now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the UNT agreement. I introduced this topic to you all last year at budget time, and we've talked about it sporadically throughout the course of the year, but we operate with UNT to provide the shuttle service on a 10-year agreement that was signed in 2018. It expires in 2028. And ultimately in this conversation, we are trying to strengthen our relationship with the university. We want to recognize the value that they bring to DCTA. We want them to recognize the value that DCTA brings to them. And then we want to maximize ridership and minimize total cost of service delivery. The agreement that we have is not just about service hours and what's the cost, but it really is about creating a comprehensive transportation network that works for the university and for the city of Denton and for the agency. And that really is the spirit of the conversation that we're trying to drive. And so if you recall, over the last couple of years, we've done really in-depth analysis to understand what is our overall cost of service on a per hour basis by buses. What we saw was the cost of service on the bus operation didn't match what the UNT contract rate is for the contract that was signed in 2018. And so we've requested going into fiscal 26, a 30% price increase. That would be $97.22 rather than the $72.25 that is currently in the contract. The university is evaluating that request. They did issue a request for information to the marketplace to understand what does a bus operation cost. I think that's going to generate a lot of good conversation, especially around comparing apples to apples from a straightforward charter service versus a fully federally compliant public transportation operation. But that's the best way for us both to get to the place that we need to be. So a little bit more behind what was behind our ask. This is a snapshot from the fiscal 24 budget that obviously we're in fiscal 25, so we don't have this after action report available for the current year. But in fiscal 24, we were looking at revenues of 3.6 million for the base service, up to 4.3 when you added all the other things to it. And our actual cost, as we calculated it, was $2.3 million for the core bus service. And if you look at 2.3 versus 4.3, you're saying, well, we're doing pretty good. The challenge is that the buses don't just run on their own. They don't run without mechanics. They don't run without dispatchers. They don't run without an administrative function at the agency to cause all those things to work. And so when we add those sort of indirect costs, you see that the math doesn't look as favorable. And that's really what's behind our conversation with UNT right now is how do we adequately reflect the total cost of service, get compensated for that, while also recognizing that DCTA does benefit from the service that we offer at UNT with regard to generating a comprehensive bus network in the future. Also considering that the GO Zone service really wasn't contemplated when the UNT contract was initially signed is something that we have to consider. And as we look at optimizing, moving as many people as cost effectively as possible by the right mode, we simply can't do that unless we have UNT at the table with us as partners. And that's really the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. More sort of recap as to why that is important. Remember Connect 7, 6, and 3, and then the rest of these are UNT services. And we said that if we could figure out how to run a comprehensive network that looked kind of like that, maybe 30% of the GO Zone capacity in Denton could be reallocated to other parts of the city of Denton or other parts of the service area, or put in the bank to help with the A-Train operation and other major capital investments in the future. That's the reason that we're trying to think through that. There's some financial policy provisions that are at play here with the current financial policy that you all approve on an annual basis that talks about what's the contract rate or what's the contractual rate expectations that we charge to universities within member cities? How do administrative fees play into that? And I would say that those things aren't necessarily reflected in the agreement that we have with UNT right now. And so we'll talk about this again at the end, but there's an opportunity to look at our financial policy in light of this conversation we're having with the university and figure out how we make alignment across all of these things. So for all that said, For this year, the base service rate 7478, base service hours 42,316, 3164, 3,164,390. Same for lift, same for fuel, and the $49,000 fee for student access to the Connect service brings us to a $3.7 million contract valuation. This note down here is really important. These conversations with UNT are continuing. We're having conversations right now about the service plan for next year. If they expect enrollment to be down again, that could adjust how many service hours we deliver. The good news is we've got this dialed in that we understand what routes are driving which of those service hours. Also things like maybe we don't need to run weekend service on the UNT system, or maybe the UNT system could stop running at an earlier hour of the day. Those are the kinds of levers we're trying to work with UNT to deliver them the best possible service while also trying to be cost effective. So hourly number of hours could drive a change in this number or an upward adjustment to that hourly rate. Any questions? Okay, so now we'll get into the round robin portion of our presentation where members of the exec team will come up and speak to the expanded level projects that we are requesting for this year. If you recall, we call an expanded level project something that is a standalone one-time item that drives some level of significance on either a capital or an operating cost, or that is tied specifically to a work plan item that we expect to show up in our goals for fiscal 26. And so we've got a section for operating and a section for capital. We're gonna run through these generally in this order. First, I'll have Javier come up and talk about the transit app, then I'm gonna jump back in and then we'll be on to planning and operations. Javier.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As Paul said, I'm going to kick off this conversation with the expanded level project for the transit app. I will preface this by saying that I'm going to be presenting on a few items today that are a direct result of the conversation we had on the January board workshop regarding digital customer experience. So I've got a few items that kind of build on each other, but kicking this one off is our transit app. The transit app is our public facing app that is heavily utilized for vehicle location, next vehicle arrival, and actual planning as well. Today, we're currently sponsoring the Transit Royale app, a decision that was made for the FY25 budget. The Royale subscription allows users and riders to actually see trips that are a little bit further out in both distance and time. And another big win is the integration of GoZone or microtransit into the transit app, giving visibility of all of our services for our member cities, such as Louisville and Highland Village, specifically where they only have GoZone as the mode of service outside of the A train to move around the city. We're currently wrapping up testing on that integration, and we'll be launching that in the next few weeks. So users of the transit app will be able to see all modes of transit within the app in Denton as well. Looking ahead, we'll actually be pushing and actually working with our marketing team to put a big push for additional riders to have the app and just let them know what DCTA is doing and the sponsoring aspect of it. This proposed expansion of the transit app provides DCTA with rider feedback through a few different modules that I've listed here. There's the guide platform, which provides additional trip planning capabilities and also has the ability to show detours a little bit more easily. We have the Inform module, which actually allows folks to have more in-app service alerts. We get the option to push out more alerts as needed, and also provides users with network change preview tools. And then importantly is the Listen side, which is a rider survey platform that also includes, it's like on this graphic here that I have, it's maybe hopefully visible, but there's just questions that pop up as you're riding the system. So if a lot of folks, including myself, when I'm riding transit, just have the transit app open to see where they are on the line. They'll look at questions like, how safe was your operator driving? And then you'll get, easy options that you can select. They're just low friction survey items that are real-time feedback. Other ones such as how clean is the inside of this bus, is the bus on time, so on and so forth. That feedback is pretty instant, and we can use it for just gathering data on our system that we may not be able to get without having people ride the system or ride surveys or pass out, general surveys. Things that people don't really want to do, but they don't mind doing from a mobile device. Overall, this would result in an increase of $81,500 per year on the transit app platform, bringing the overall expense to $105,000 annually for the entire platform for the product. Any questions? And with that, I'll wrap up this item.
Thank you. I want to commend Javier on bringing the transit app to the floor, and it's very timely in that part of the conversation that we had with UNT was student satisfaction with service. And oftentimes the loudest voices are the ones that see things that are incorrect or wrong, but we also get a lot of feedback on the other end. And so I think the transit app is something that we can offer to the university to say we really are listening to our riders, not just on the university side, but on the general public service as well. Jackie Bronson, our Human Resources VP and Engagement Administration, is in ERP today. And so I'm presenting a couple of items for her. The first is the language English proficiency study. This is typically part and is currently part of our Title VI program. The Title VI program obviously assuring equal access to riders regardless of national origin, all those sorts of things. We have not had an update to this since 2019, and it's necessary in order for us to maintain compliance with our federal requirements. And so we're going to go into our training review next week from the FTA. And so we'll learn more about this requirement and what specifics they might be looking for us from it. But we felt the need to be prepared for that by putting this in the budget for next year. Then this next item is titled an organizational structure and total compensation review. And the reason that it's in the budget is really because since 2021, we've undertaken a lot of change at the DCTA organization. And the team that we've built so far really has been on an annual basis, we've put pieces together. I think the question that you asked earlier, Mr. Chairman, about how does our general and administrative compare to other transit agencies of our size, I think we benefit from having a third party look at the overall structure of the organization, say, does this make sense? And then while doing that, do we have all the job descriptions covered that we need to do? What's the risk to core functions that may only have one person assigned to those core functions, all those sorts of things. And then in the current financial policy, it says that we'll do this sort of review on a once every 3-year basis. And so there's another thing in here regarding Fair Labor Standards Act exemption status. So do any of these employees that we have, should they be hourly that are currently salaried? There's things like that that we need to do in order to be compliant. So with no new positions added this year, a functioning organizational structure, this gives us the opportunity to sort of lock that in and say we've got all of our bases covered. And so that's the crux of that item. And with that, I'll turn it over to Austin, talk about planning ELPs.
Thank you, Paul. So we've got some planning LPs we'll review with you today. First one is related to the long range service plan. Our current long range service plan was completed in 2012 and no longer reflects the agency's post-transformational goals. So this funding will allow DCTA to advance that long range service plan, aligning with future growth, multimodal integration, and post-ISP implementation planning. This plan will set the framework for DCTA development and growth beyond FY28, bridging the transformation from short-term ISP related tasks to long-term strategies. Staff has initiated some limited long-range service plan tasks in FY25, such as data framework setup, cost of service modeling, and other items related to fleet planning. This would continue that effort along for next fiscal year. So the plan is essential for prioritizing investments, responding to regional growth, and pursuing competitive federal and state grants that require strategic alignment. Some of the projects you'll see on the scope related to long range service plan is corridor performance along A train I-35, potential for route analysis in Louisville for growth, fare policy, as we mentioned earlier in the board meeting, looking at a corridor vision for FM 407, aligning with master plans, and then trail system integration and facility and space planning. So as we envision this long range service plan, we see this as kind of a book with chapters, and each chapter will be developed as a task order, essentially a separate task within that master long-range service plan. And we'll be bringing that information for you to review and approve in the coming months. So that is the long-range service plan. This ELP is related to the facility assessment, roofing and lighting. So currently, we have quite a number of facilities right now that have roofs that are aging quickly based on when the building was put into operation. So part of this is to look at those roofs and provide a conditional assessment that gives us a grade and gives us recommendations on how we maintain that roof, and then when would we need to replace it. So that can go into our capital plan. Similarly, on the lighting within the rail stations, this example on the bottom left is our current rail stations that have the Sternberg lighting fixtures. These are original to the stations when the rail line was built. As you can see, they are experiencing some age, and some of the light fixtures are either no longer working, cannot get replaced, or some of the internal components are failing. So we want to do an overall lighting assessment to determine what elements need to be upgraded or replaced. These are incandescent lights from what I understand, so upgrading to LED too is something we want to look at as well. ISP support. So as you all are aware, we have been implementing ISP phase 1, phase 2. This ISP support would be for consultant support to help us further on ISP phase 3, which is going to integrate potentially additional routes and consolidation of routes. So this would just be ongoing support within our planning department to look at data analysis, analytics, provide information that would be presented to the board as far as what do we do for the next phase ISP. Bus stop A&E design support. This is another consultant support that we're looking to have for what would come out of our bus stop design standards. This would be the architecture, engineering, design plans that would support implementing our new standards. So bottom left is a snapshot of somewhat of a standard that we're going to be looking at implementing with landing pads for ADA accessibility. So we're going to do analysis of what are our top stops that we need to address immediately. This contract or this support would come in and give us actual design plans that we could submit for permitting to actually implement the proposed improvements. Old Town Louisville TOD support. This is another consultant support that we're going to be looking to gain as we move forward the RFQ process with Old Town Louisville and that TOD development. We foresee support needed for responding to RFIs, just the overall development and implementation of support. We also would like to look at the creation of a formal policy across TOD within the alignment of the A-Train, so we can actually have a board policy that addresses real estate acquisition and other items related to TOD specifically. Fleet transition plan. This is one that we want to really dive into. We do have initial fleet plan for our revenue vehicles on our bus fleet. This is going to further that along. We also need to look at our cutaway fleet as well as our non-rev fleet. So these plans would essentially get into looking at developing those further. We also want to look at what does that look like from an alternative fuels perspective. So when we talk about CNG, electric, hybrid, what does that mean to the facility? What upgrades would be needed to support the alternative fuels when we get there? So this would just advance the current fleet plan we have in place and identify a report that would tell us what we need to invest in if we did, if and when we did proceed with a different alternative fuel. Bus stop standards development. We are currently working on the bus stop standards development right now as part of a FY 25 ELP. This would be to further that along and essentially to finalize it. This also includes some stakeholder engagement with the cities and UNT to communicate the new bus stop standards. What does that look like? And then further define any specifications that weren't defined in the initial task order. And then I think we move over to capital. Okay, so I'm gonna keep rolling. So on the capital side of things, we're gonna start out with fleet requirements for the 35-foot transit bus. Believe in a previous board meeting, Javier presented the top option of the purchase of the 3 Gillig buses for 2.4 million. This plan is still in place. We've also added, as Jane mentioned, this bottom picture, which is the rebuild of the 2006 Gillig. We want to do one of those as somewhat of a pilot to understand opportunities that would feed into our long-range fleet plan. So that this ELP is the purchase of those 3 Gillig buses, 35-foot low-floor diesel, and then the 1 rebuild 2006 Gillig. With that, this is a snapshot that we've been working on. Essentially, this is our fleet plan moving to 2031. And at a high level, what this is showing you is minimum of buses that we need to operate, our spare ratio, which is 28. And then how do we maintain that spare ratio with the purchasing of new buses, with the rebuilds, and then with the decommissioning of older buses that have exceeded their useful life. So we've got quite a bit of beyond useful life vehicles that are in our queue right now. So over time, you'll see that hopefully that yellow gets smaller, and then definitely the green will get larger with the new vehicles being purchased. So this, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Whatever
sure.
you're done with, okay.
Okay, so as you'll see, the next we're purchasing 3 buses this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, proposed 3 buses being ordered, 1 being rebuilt, and then FY 27 we'll have those 3 buses we ordered this year being delivered, another 3 buses being ordered, and then contingent on how the rebuild goes, we will proceed with some more rebuilds in FY 27.
So one of the things I want to say about this is this current peak of 23 buses, this is based on the service plan we're currently operating. 28 buses gets us to our spare ratio. Then the yellow lines are looking at if we added service along University Drive, if we added something on the east side of Denton, we would need more buses. That shows you the peak potentially starting next summer. However, if our conversation with UNT causes us to say because of their needs or whatever it might be that we want to run fewer UNT routes, then obviously that changes the calculus here, and it may change the number of buses that we purchase. It doesn't change the fact that we want to get beyond extended beyond useful life buses and those sorts of things. But just I'm saying this to be cognizant of, we're not just saying we got to buy these buses and that's the end of it. We got to buy these buses based on our current service plan. As our service plan changes, it causes us to think differently. So that's it.
Moving on with the additional fleet that we're looking to purchase. So we would like to proceed with the purchase of a 1 cutaway Ford Arbach. This is a vehicle that has exceeded its useful life as far as mileage, even though it has the 2018 year on there. The way we've calculated our useful life benchmark in our TAM plan has included not only mileage, but year, condition, maintenance. So other factors beyond age go into our decision to replace this specific one. And as I mentioned, the fleet plan that we're working on next fiscal year will give us a similar chart as you saw before with the cutaway specifically, and how we can, what do we need to incorporate with these other entities or these other elements that we're looking into as we move into replace these 2018s as well. On the non-revenue vehicle side of things, we've got 3 vehicles being purchased next fiscal year. This includes 2 2007 model Ford Rangers and 1 2009. Sorry, I had that wrong. 1 2007 Dodge 1-ton that's services the maintenance shop, and then 1 2007 Ford Ranger and a 2009 Ford Ranger. These Rangers are for dispatch and crew relief. As I mentioned, the 1-ton is for the maintenance shop. Both of these 3 items have exceeded their useful life, and we would like to replace these. Moving on to A-train curb speed improvements, we briefed you all on this in previous board consent items. So this is the ELP related to the A-train curb and speed improvements for $3 million. This is going to allow us to have that Lochner program administration task, as well as the Rio Grande actual implementation element that would hopefully, we're targeting a 3 to 4 minute improvement each direction. Again, this is elements that would support the future expansion of the 15-minute headways, and then allow us to get the train moving faster next fiscal year. This one is related to the downtown Carrollton extension and the 15-minute headway task order. This is the $5 million task item that's related to the 30% preliminary engineering for downtown Carrollton, 15% conceptual design for the 15-minute headways. I think we've reviewed this in detail, but this is the one that I think we talked about as flexible depending on which delivery method we go with, 28%, 17%. We'll figure out what that is, but this is the budget item for this ELP. And then with that, I think I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Good afternoon. We'd like to purchase a bus column lift. Currently, the maintenance departments have 3 of those, and they were purchased between 2005 and 2013. We need 2 to operate to meet the maintenance shop requirements. And we have 1 that has already been overhauled, 1 that needs to be replaced, and 1 that's getting close to its useful life. So we would like to replace that. It's for the safety of the mechanics. Once the bus is lifted in the air, we need those lifts to be working properly. Push to talk cradles. These are mounts that will hold our radios. We are looking to purchase new radios or procure new radio systems, and the cradles will allow the radios to stay in the vehicles. Currently, radios have to be dispatched every day so that they can be charged every evening. And this will help us to get to our standard equipment, and it will stay in the vehicles, and it'll be more unified for the operators. Door facing cameras. This is a dash cam that we would like to purchase. Currently, we do not have any dash cams on our vehicles. This will help operators. It will protect operators and passengers. It also will help us to have data to classify accidents and improve safety for operators, where we'll be able to show them what their driving habits are and be able to approve those.
Sorry, this is one of those animated slides that doesn't show up when I'm practicing it, but apparently it's here. So let me fast forward to the actual slide and hopefully not go too far. I think this is it. Okay, this is an update to the FY24 project, the expanded level program for electronic security and digital passenger signage. This is a slide you've seen before, but what we've done is gone ahead and cleaned it up. As you'll recall, when we first brought up this project, it was designed to be a 4-year program. Our integrated prep tech said, hey, we can do it in 2 years. So we said, why not? So we opted to go with that. And what I've done here is just cleaned up this slide to more accurately reflect what we've done, how we're spending the money, and what the scope and budget looks like now. There is still FY24 displayed up there as a 3rd year. There was no work done in FY24, but we did need a large mobilization deposit to get the project rolling, and that deposit was sent towards the end of the year, which is why it's reflected up here. That portion was $1.5 million that was expended during that time period. In FY25, the work that we've performed so far is our access control systems, which we completed in the next few weeks. And then we'll also have completed our camera surveillance systems for our DCTA facilities. You may see one right over there and throughout the building. And then we also have, once we wrap up the facilities in the next month or so, we'll be looking at our surveillance system upgrades for our A-train stations. We'll be moving on to the platforms. And then along with that, we've also are simultaneously working on many of the network hardware upgrades and implementation costs associated with upgrading all this equipment and adding all this equipment to our network. Overall for FY25, our projected spend is $2.7 million approximately, including all the design services, the hardware, the installation, and then the vendor project management that's included with our services. As far as an operating expense impact for FY25, we did go ahead and hire 1 program staff for this. It's a IT operations coordinator. That individual is serving a dual purpose where they're also supporting some of the mobility devices such as our Swiftly and APCs and the tablets that we put on vehicles. And then we are also having them work through our security operations center and also managing some of the relationship and support issues that may arise from our new systems. In FY26, we are looking at wrapping up the entire project and starting with wrapping up the A-train station cameras. And then we'll be moving on towards fleet, which includes our heavy transit bus fleet, our cutaway fleet, and then finally our A-train fleet towards the end of the project. In FY26, we'll also be doing the 3rd component of the project, which is digital passenger signage, which includes signage for our A-train platforms. The planned expense is $1.6 million approximately. Retaining in the operating side, the 1 staff member that we hired this year, and then adding 1 more headcount under the engagement administration organization for the security side as a security operations specialist, which will reside at our new security operations center, monitoring ingress and egress from the buildings, as well as being the person who receives any camera requests or surveillance footage requests, and then just general operation of that center. We've also included approximately $300,000 in replacement parts, service, and maintenance for any components that are live today. We do have maintenance agreements in place with our integrator today, but by that point, we'll be about 18 months into our program. The overall snapshot is the program investment was $5.766 million. We've expended $2.7 million of that so far. We are currently still chipping away at our initial deposit, so we're still operating under that. We expect to start receiving actual invoices for progress beyond the deposit as this year progresses, with the remaining balance of $3 million approximately to wrap up the project next year. Any questions?
I am going to have to duck out due to my COG engagement, so my apologies. I'm going to be handing this over to Cesar. I did have 2 comments on the remaining slides for whatever they're worth. Number 1, I don't believe we bring in $1 million in ticket revenue.
We do not.
And so we're exploring $1 million in a ticket vending machine. I don't know.
Can I speak to that one real quick?
Sure.
That was part of my concerns about this one is as we look forward into decreasing the amount of revenue that we take in cash on the vehicles at friction point, this is a holistic system, the ticket vending machines, and then looking at a few slides ahead at the account-based ticketing and contactless fare payment systems. You have to have a way to convert cash to tap-based systems. There's no way of really collecting cash for our agency outside of our ticket platforms, as well as our transit center. There's just no other conversion method. So to stay within FTA guidance and Title VI, there has to be that conversion factor. these machines and along the DART rail line as well allow for a user to go in, pay cash, and receive an account-based ticketing tap card system, whether it be a Go Pass tap card or a disposable card that's a 1-day, 3-day pass or what may be. There's no other way to buy those. And the other option is, you know, putting them in 7-Elevens and whatnot. But I mean, the retail network, the retail banking network has not been friendly towards that. And it's a little bit more of a friction point. So
I think you can, the point.
It's a conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. I just wanted to share the general holistic view of this ELP and the account-based ticketing ELP. They go together, and while they don't collect a whole lot of revenue, looking ahead from a perspective that I've been thinking about recently is as we work towards connecting the A train to the Silver Line and that 1 seat transfer to the airport, I could see a lot more use coming out of the TVMs.
Fair. So I mean, that's context. My other comment is, I know a little bit further on, we're talking about moving to a VoIP-based phone system. No issue whatsoever. Please, for the love of God, do not buy white phones. I've seen a trend. I've seen a trend now with the phones becoming white
Did I
with
put a
white
white photo in
handsets.
there?
I'm gonna tell you right now, after about a week and a half of makeup, you don't want to put that handset anywhere near you.
I've got a black phone in the photo.
Yeah, you do. So that's good. That's not necessarily representative of what we end up with. So.
I was worried to put a white one in there.
Just give me the white phone, everybody else, but I'm just, that's my nit to pick on that one. But other than that, I don't have any issues. So my apologies for taking it on a tangent, but.
No worries whatsoever. Thank you
Other
for
than
doing
that, I want to thank you and I apologize that I have to.
Understood. Thank you. The short story on this ELP is basically DART is moving on from the existing GenFare ticket vending machines that are throughout the entire DART network. Regionally, we've agreed to a system that works for all of us. DCTA has the ability to piggyback on top of the DART contract to utilize, so that we all have the same regional system, same regional back office. We can all jump from one system to the other and have a fair policy that goes throughout all 3 transit agencies. Today, we've got 2 per platform, 1 at Trinity Mills, and then under the $1 million estimate, we are looking at replacing 2 with 1 unit, and also having the capability of possibly having a spare unit as well as 1 at the transit center as well. So looking forward, that's what this project looks like. Again, ties into the account-based ticketing system. So that's where we're at with ticket vending machines today. DART will begin deploying theirs in FY26 and moving down the green line towards FY26, FY27. This slide is an update to an FY25 ELP. We kicked off this 4-task program as a result of a program that we did with AECOM a few years back, just doing a general assessment of the fiber optic condition and where we're at with our fiber. Ultimately, the first 2 tasks that are undergoing today under the $278,000 that we're spending in fiscal year 25 are the location of all the lateral movements off of our fiber optic backbone that's along the A-train corridor. The fiber optic backbone is used for our operational network for the A-train communications, our administrative network, our ticket vending machines, our security camera systems. They all flow on that backbone. There have been numerous modifications done to that platform over the course of the lifespan of the A-train. And we've had 2 different contractors over that course of time, and the as-built haven't been updated. There's a lot of lack of information as far as where the laterals are. We've had a few cuts due to that. Ultimately, what this project does is it brings all that information up to date, identifies laterals, identifies the handholds, identifies the condition of those. And that's the work that's being done in FY25. Up to date, the Rio Grande is actually performing this work for us. They've gone from the southernmost end of the most southern control point of the A-train, and they've hit the southern base of the lake. Looking ahead, they'll be moving forward up north to the DDTC, at which point they'll be completing tasks 1 and 2 as scheduled for FY25. Looking into FY26 for the $175,000 expense, they'll be going back up the corridor, identifying all the condition of the backbone of the entire backbone of it. They'll also be providing a condition assessment of the actual fiber optic cabling that's inside the conduits. Ultimately, what this program will do is give us an 811 dig map of the entire corridor so that we don't end up with any emergency cuts or repairs. Provide us with the condition of the overall fiber, the conduit. They've already found that some of the conduit's exposed in several locations. It's just come up over the years. And it'll give us another program moving ahead so we can better inform capital improvements to both the fiber optic cabling and the conduit looking ahead. For our network switching hardware, it's the backbone of what every computer, every camera, every phone plugs into at DCTA. Our current infrastructure is approaching 12 years old. We deployed it in 2014 when I started. And over the years, we've just gone ahead and tacked on new network switches, kind of similar generation or one ahead. But at this point, a lot of them are at end of life. They don't really receive firmware upgrades, which of course adds to no security updates as well. So what we're asking for is to replace all the network switches to come in line with the new ones that we've deployed over the past year for the electronic security program. The new switches are cloud managed. They give my team a little bit of relief from overall scope of managing disparate switches. It's, again, cloud view, and it integrates better with our cybersecurity systems that we have today that let us get notifications when someone plugs into something that they shouldn't plug into. Again, giving us a unified solution to manage the entire network. This would be a forklift upgrade. Every single switch would match at that point, and we'll have a good solid point to move forward on from here. This cost estimate for this program is $110,000 for all of our switches, and includes deployment, configuration, and installation assistance as well. This next item I touched a little bit on already. This again was an output of the.
Joe Mason. I just had a few general questions about your services, as well as your utility situation there in Highland Village.
No worries. Again, contactless fare payment system, a item that came out of our customer experience discussion at the board workshop. We don't have any onboard payment technology today. What we do is we have a little box, a little diamond fare box that we push cash in, and the operator will give you a ticket, or you just ride the system. Account-based ticketing and open loop payments, as a quick refresher, is basically account-based ticketing is either something that you load value onto your mobile device, or you have a card that you keep and reload on a regular basis, whether it be a ticket vending machine, point of sale, whatever it may be, or you have the convenience of just using something that's in your wallet or your mobile device. So you just pay with your Apple Pay, you can pay with your credit card, tap to pay, whatever it may be. Both are options on these systems. What we are proposing, so let me backtrack a little bit. We're working with DART and Trinity Metro. All three agencies have met in a room to meet with 3 or 4 different vendors so far. I think we meet every 3 weeks or so with a new vendor. We're trying to get one system that works for all 3 agencies, one that you can ride from Trinity Metro all the way through DART, all the way to DCTA on one system. I've also learned a lot about what it takes to support this platform, which I'll touch on a next slide. But what we're looking at today is asking for full authorization for the actual platform, the hardware, the backend, the configuration, but deploying it as a small pilot program towards the end of the year. I say trying to say a pilot program because these systems have a very large software expense in the beginning, so it may not be too feasible to do a pilot. But what we could do is roll out the hardware slowly so we can see how they mount, how they work, how we support them, and then roll them out to the rest of the fleet, but have the capital expense up front. So what I have learned over the past year or so of having conversations with my peers, you have to do this right. If you deploy this, you put it out there, it doesn't work or it breaks off the bat, you get one shot with your passengers to get this right. What I've learned is that these account-based ticketing systems are kind of a new wing for DCTA. We don't really have a revenue technology team here. Fare systems touch technology, they touch finance, they touch the planning team for data, and they touch our customer service teams as well. From the IT side of things, we're looking at systems management, the hardware, the backend application support. A division of IT would be the operational technology, which we've talked about a little bit today. For field devices, repairing TVMs, repairing the validators, repairing the hardware that we put out there. And then from the revenue side, you've got finance folks who are associated with handling the back end. There's two back end platforms that you introduce with these systems. Customer support, you really need folks that are, you know, that can support. There's a lot of account-based systems in the back end and refunds and how do I use this? That adds to additional support calls as well. And then, of course, on the planning side, you have ridership and fare analysis and kind of how they come together. One big part of this program and one big push is we can allow UNT or other university partners access to the system or provide us with regular updates on their student count, and we can either modify their existing student IDs with a request or push them towards a mobile device so we can identify who our student ridership is, who is a UNT rider versus who is a regular passenger riding on the Connect service or the UNT network. So it's also a data gathering point as well as a fair revenue collection system. I'm not asking for this today, but typically what you'd see is about 4 to 5 additional people in a lean organization where you have a manager of revenue technology that's over the top of, and in DCTA's case, we're thinking about it from the perspective of operational technology and revenue. Basically the same folks that support the hardware for Swiftly and the tablets that we use for Spare Labs and so on and so forth are the same people that also manage the fare revenue systems. We're looking at field technicians that would go out and repair these things. Today, we have a contract with DART through an ILA that repairs and does fare revenue collection for our ticket vending machines. That's something that we could potentially bring in-house and offset some of the costs of additional field technicians and bring that capability in-house to DCTA. Those two skill sets overlap. From the application side, of course, an additional analyst or more workload on the analyst today to support the back end. From the finance side, possibly a revenue analyst, or if there's slack in the organization somehow that they could also take that on. And then again, from the customer experience side, either additional staffing or increased training for our staffing to support this platform. So just a snapshot of what it takes to support these things. I think it's fair to put that up front. It's just one of those things that needs to be supported well to be successful. So with that, I believe, nope, wait, still have one more. Any questions on the fare payment side? Last item on my docket is our phone system. Again, similar to our existing switching, our phone system has been here since I've been here since 2014. We deployed it back then and it's been great for us, but it is at end of life. It's an on-prem system that is not very flexible to expansion. It's not very flexible for remote work in the case of inclement weather. And really just at end of life, no more software patches, no more security updates. It's at the end. We're looking at moving to a cloud-based phone system to allow additional flexibility and not have to deal with the issues that come up with on-prem phone systems. And with this $81,000 program, it includes our phones, it includes the first year annual operating costs for the platform, as well as the deployment and configuration of the new system. So this system would also let us, if we opt to in the future or whatever the agency direction heads, for insourcing the GoZone customer support, we could very easily flex up that service and allow it to integrate with other CRM solutions as well. So again, $81,000 to this program, and the operating costs are just a hair under that after that. That wraps me up and back to Jane.
Out here. Okay, we're close, y'all. Promise we're almost done, at least with the budget part. So G&A is the only department we haven't covered yet, so I'll go over that really high level. So overall, you see that it totals 11.3 million, as we mentioned earlier. And the decrease in materials and supplies where there's some computer and software supplies that were bought in 25 that did not need to be repurchased in 26. That is why there's just a decrease there. And then utilities is that Verizon cell code that I had mentioned earlier. All right, capital and major maintenance. And so this is, you also have it at your space if it helps. It's on, I think, either legal or 11 by 17. Might be a little easier to look at, but I do have it broken out here for you as well. So it's 2 slides or 1 piece of paper, so your choice. But basically what you're looking at in the top there is if you are looking at the green, that's the cash spend, the 18 million that we talked about for the year. And then the blue are capital reserves. That's the TAM, the Transit Asset Management, money that we're setting aside. And you can see it broken down over the years. So we'll show the chair that in July as well, again, and also in the long range financial plan, we'll be able to show that too. So you can kind of see how that's done. And then the non-DCTA, the only thing that's non-DCTA would be the trip, which is on the next page. But I'll kind of work you through what you're looking at here. So you're under bus services, and as you can see in all the green, those are all the ones that you just heard about from our representatives that were talking about their own ELPs. And then the transit asset management, we have built out for fleet replacement at 500,000. It had been 400. We moved it up to the 500, just knowing that as we're getting into the years, we're starting to do that and going to continue to do that. We wanted to bump that up a little bit. So 500,000 for the out years, in addition to the fleet replacement connect at the one, we bumped that up from a 1.4 to a 1.5 million. Our out years as a whole, these are pretty locked in, we believe, unless we decide to make a change in July. But the out years for the others are a little bit arbitrary right now. They're built off of percentages, but it's something that we're really going to be working on fine tuning when we come back in July, and having this capital plan match our long range financial plan, just as it did last summer. It's just, we've really worked hard for this particular meeting to really focus on the FY26 numbers. And then you move down into rail services. So the two projects that we have for the year are the major maintenance rail, and then the second half of the Railcom dispatch. So that's one program that started at 500 in this year, and it's 300 for next year, and it doesn't have any capital costs in the outlying years. And then we've got the 1.8 million built in for TAM major maintenance rail. And then next is our under G&A services. That's all the ELPs that we also just heard about. And the green box that you see here, everything also listed as new in FY26. That way, you know, that's something that's that's a new number that we're introducing in 26. A couple of them though, like electronic safety and security, as Javier had mentioned, it's a 2-year program. We had the in 24. It wasn't like necessarily really starting that year, but the project as an end, the 5.7 did not change. And any of the projects that did go over to multiple years, the end number did not change. It's just the numbers might have fluctuated a little bit based on when we had some of our costs. And then that takes you on down to the trip funding throughout the years. That's in yellow just because it's a number that's plugged right now. It's not our real number yet, but we'll have more information on that in FY26. So that's what gives us the rounded out number, the $28 million in capital for FY26. Any questions on that as a whole? All right. This is a reserve fund policy. Paul mentioned this a little bit earlier. We just wanted you to have the visibility to it. When we do vote on the budget in August, this is one of the things that we vote on. And it's been laid out the same for a number of years. And this is in this box, you can kind of see that. But we do know, based on the conversations that we're having with UNT, that it might need a change, and we might need to have a board approval for that. And so as we continue to have those conversations, we will see how this kind of manifests. But for the time being, it's laid out as this, but we just kind of wanted to let you guys know that we'll be having more conversations about it, and it might need to change. All right, and then debt services. So we have two revenue refunding bonds from 2020 and 2021. Our outstanding debt on them is approximately 11 million. It's this 6.2 plus the 5.3 there. These are just, like I said, the contractual obligations that we have that we like to show y'all every year. And so there's not a whole lot more to that. We have some principal and interest that we'll pay, all known charges, all built into the budget. But we just want to be sure to show you the debt service slides as well. And then organizational structure review, Paul will cover with you.
So just two slides here. Number one, we always want to, in our budget, put forward what the org structure looks like from year to year, so that we can always go back and say, this is what we're working through. This is the structure for fiscal 26, as we've talked about, no additional headcount. Over the course of this year, we have moved positions somewhat between organizations. I think it's fair to say that where positions have changed levels, they have changed from a higher level position to a lower level position, as we seek to optimize getting the work done at the right level. The chart on the right shows you the distribution by salary band of the positions that were filled right before this budget deck was produced. If we were to put the total authorized positions, that shape does not change. And so lean at the top, broad base of support at the bottom, and working to cover all of our core functions. The positions necessary for the security and access control program and signage and all that sort of stuff had been in the budget from fiscal 2024. And we're shown in the budget for fiscal 25. And so we're going to actually fill the security controls technician this year, like Javier said. And then as we've learned more about the NTMC integration, we've used taken the opportunity to take our authorizations and just make sure we've got all of our pieces covered, but overall working within the budgeted headcount as shown here. So with that, it's the end of our budget workshop. I know there's a lot of information, appreciate your patience with it. But it's important to give you a holistic overview of where we're going next year and provide the opportunity to comment. As I've had conversations with people in the public in the past about where's the agency going, I've said, I think we're moving from a season of transformation to optimization. In the last 3 years, we've been building the organization as we've been going. We've been turning over rocks to understand what does it take to do these big aspirational things that we're trying to accomplish. We see that now, and we're going to start moving towards them. That's a component of the optimization. The other component of it is really the biggest chunk of our ridership in the UNT service, and how does that fit in with GoZone, and how does that fit in with our Connect network and all that sort of stuff. There's opportunities there as well. So that concludes our briefing on this budget item. Happy to answer any questions before we move forward. Okay.
That's very thorough. I appreciate that. We'll have an opportunity to discuss some more in July. But appreciate all the backgrounds. Really good.
Yes, sir. So what you can expect from here is we'll come back in July, having not heard a lot of feedback on the direction. We're going to take that as we're heading in the right direction. So we're going to focus in the July meeting on the long-range financial plan and how do we pay for and execute these really ambitious capital expenditures like the A-Train, like the TOD, all that sort of stuff. So, yes, sir.
About UNP, what about the new route?
We actually did not establish that route. That's a conversation we were having with them last summer, and then they did not opt to take that on. And so that's why it's not in the budget. We did the drill. I think we need to go back to TWU and check in with them again, but we don't have it right now.
Okay. And then UNT combining the campuses in Frisco.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it hasn't been excluded, but I think the focus right now is focusing on the Denton campus. And then I think that UNT as a whole is trying to figure out how do they think about these two separate campuses that they have, and how do you get people back and forth. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, those folks can also discuss.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon again. I'm good? All right. Maybe not. Okay. All right. All right, we're going to pair these agenda items, 3 and 4. The first item is discuss and consider approval of task order restructured construction LLC in the amount not to exceed $141,613.43 for the construction renovation of the Denton County Transportation Authority Administrative Headquarters at 1955 Lakeway Drive, Suite 260 and 265, Louisville, Texas. And regular agenda item number 4, discuss and consider approval of the resolution approving budget revision 2025-11 in the amount of $259,603.43 for the construction renovation of the Denton County Transportation Authority Administrative Headquarters at 1955 Way Drive, Suite 260 and 265 in Louisville, Texas. So this is a recommendation. We will review that one at the end. So as far as the project, I believe we briefed this back in March, where we had the opportunity to expand in the adjacent suite next to us. That suite was becoming vacant, and there was an opportunity to enter an agreement, a lease agreement with Holt Lunsford. We executed that agreement a couple months ago. So now we actually have the keys to this suite, and we are ready to perform the renovations to make that a usable space for us. So within the scope, Suite 265, which is the adjacent suite, this includes demolition of 3 walls to create a better circulation. It's a front and rear pass-through, kitchen reconfiguration for more seating, flooring replacement in some areas, and some closets for janitorial and general storage. Suite 260, which is the suite we're in right now, this involves some minor demolition of interior walls in the far right-hand corner of this area right here. That's going to open up the space to this pass-through and allow a little bit more collaborative area for our existing staff. Back in March, as I mentioned, we brought to the board initial fit-out estimate of $390,000. This included the renovation cost, furniture, IT equipment, and access control. It was also mentioned that the FY26 operating budget, as mentioned before, we're going to absorb some of the costs related to utilities, janitorial, pest control, fire protection, insurance, and taxes. So this will be reflected, or is reflected, in the FY26 budget, any additional things that will be required for this additional space. So with that, we move into the fun part of cost savings. So as mentioned, we presented $390,000 estimate in March. We're able to trim that down to $259,603.43 from a budget perspective. This is how it breaks down: construction at about $141,000, IT infrastructure about $70,000, and fixture and finishes and equipment at about $48,000. So how were we able to achieve this cost savings? Just a few bullet points here. We actually removed flooring replacement for next door. We determined that the carpet's in pretty good shape, especially knowing that we may only be there for some limited time. We're going to deep clean that carpet, so we feel that's a better solution and saves us quite a bit of cost there. We were actually able to partner with the Denton County. They actually had some slightly used cubicles in their storage, and we were able to purchase those for a discounted rate, which is great. And then we actually have, sorry, did I hear something? We actually had IT infrastructure that's happening in this building, so we're able to synergize with that project to include that cost while they're already mobilized for next door. When we talk about schedule, so we currently have applied for the permit with City of Louisville for the construction next door. We are currently briefing you on the scope of contract and the budget revision. We will anticipate a contract NTP sometime early next month. start procuring any furniture and fixtures needed. Hopefully start construction in middle of next month with anticipated move-in date, hopefully in mid-October or early November timeframe. I think I have that right. Or maybe, sorry, early October timeframe. So we would hopefully be ready to accept individuals in that space before, at or around the fiscal year beginning.
This, you mentioned additional air conditioning for the racks or the computer racks.
You want to speak to server racks that I think that's included in the budget, additional server racks for next door?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And air conditioning command.
It's minimal. It's only gonna be a small rack for a little bit of network equipment that manages that side. There is already a seat for the existing IT room that the prior company was using that we'll be able to utilize. So the only real expenses for IT are gonna be to support the additional users that are there. Replacing the cabling for all the data jacks. They need to be replaced because they were cut when the old tenant moved. And they don't support our needs. And then the access control system, just an expansion of our current system over there.
Always became an issue. Places where I was.
Sure.
Yes, the gotcha ones that we want to avoid for sure. Any other questions?
I move approval of the task order with structured construction in the amount of $141,613.43.
Second. Motion, have a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next.
We heard it. You heard it still? Okay. Let's go on to item number 4. Is there a motion? I'll entertain any motions on that particular item.
I move approval of the resolution approving budget revision in the amount of $259,603.43.
And a second.
Having a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we move into item number 5, discuss updated consolidated Denton County Transportation Authority customer service functions. Paul Christina.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not either of these fine ladies. You've got the third string on this briefing. Unfortunately, Randy's out sick and then, or has been out sick and then Jackie is in ERP. So here we go. This is an update to the conversation about insourcing the customer service function for GoZone. We last briefed you in December of 2024 about call volumes throughout the day and what it looked like between GoZone and the DCTA customer service. And this is generally an update on that. We do have an item in our work plan for this year to drive towards a decision point of insourcing or keeping outsourcing of the customer service function. In the budget that you just heard earlier, it's included to continue outsourcing. However, we have that divided with GoZone, with the VIA folks into 2 6-month tranches. So we could make a decision at mid-year if we wanted to. And so at the time in December, the request was, let's continue collecting data. Let's continue learning more. And so that's what we are trying to do here. So today, the current customer service model is we've got 3 points of contact via customer service. People are using that to book GoZone rides, find where their GoZone ride is, ask general questions, voice complaints. You have DCTA customer service. That's all that stuff for the A train, for the bus, but also about booking access rides and things of that nature. And then at the downtown Denton Transit Center, we have the lobby window where we have cashiers that are selling fares, answering general questions, all those sorts of things. So what our organization structure looks like right now is we have our manager of customer service, and then we have 1 lead, and then we have 5 coordinators, 2 of them assigned to that lobby, part-time, answering phones part-time, and the other 3 are answering the phones full-time. If you remember earlier, the slide on ridership and showed that access was up 22% year over year. That's one of our highest call volume drivers for our DCTA customer service function. And what you see here is a picture of what our call volume on the DCTA customer service looks like last year, fiscal 2024, compared to this year, fiscal year 2025. What you see is the light blue bars are taller than the dark blue bars, which means call volume is going up with ridership going up. This gray hatched bar at the top is pointing to calls that come in but that don't get answered, or that you could call abandonment. We've been able to improve that number by getting fully staffed on the customer service front. Frankly, the stellar leadership of Randy Trantham, who's been working with that team now for a little bit of time, has done a lot to drive improvements there. Here's our KPIs on the DCTA customer service side. Our quality assurance score at 94%, where we randomly poll customers to get their feedback. We're beating our target of 90. We're beating our average handle time of 4 minutes. We're beating our average hold time, but we're not beating our average abandonment rate. However, when you look at how long people are waiting, they're only waiting 3 minutes, 24 seconds. And so it's not an exorbitant amount of time that they're waiting before they drop off. And so we got to learn more about what our customers expect there. Now, if we switch to the VIA side on the Go Zone service, this is again looking at last year versus this year. And you see the light blue bars again, taller than the dark blue bars. There's some seasonality going on there. But overall, much bigger call volume on the Go Zone service, even though the Go Zone service has been flat. It's hard for us to know because of the nature of this outsourced service. It's hard for us to know what's driving that. We have some anecdotal things that we can hear and that we can think. Like, for instance, people in Denton, or people in Louisville Highland Village, if they get an app proposal that says, hey, your ride will be here in 24 minutes, and they say, well, I used to be able to get it in 20, let me call and see if I can get a better answer. That we've heard that from our local management folks. The fact that we've reallocated some of that capacity from Louisville Highland Village to Louisville and Highland Village and Denton may mean a new customer base overall, or there could be confusion about, I used to be able to get a ride in this geography and now I can't. Why is that? But this is showing you call volume on the Go Zone service and the reasons why, and ride booking still remains quite significant. On the combination of those Go Zone and DCTA calls and the combination, this is how the call volume stacks up one on top of the other. And you're looking at 14,000, somewhere between 14 and 20,000 calls a month would be the volume if we were to take this on today. And that's pretty.
Lost for a minute since we lost our quorum.
Oh, sure.
Do we need to, it's a discussion item or?
Yeah, still need that.
Still in the quorum.
Okay.
Stretch for it.
Supposed to be 14 to 20,000. While we're on pause, I apologize for my phone a while ago. That was my cloud-based phone system. And I'm still really, it's great, but I'm still. It works. How we like it, so maybe pause and breathe on. What's it? We need to pause to breathe on.
Keisha, would you let him know about this?
Oh, it's just, again. It's still here.
Okay, so just really quickly, this is again, the combination of GoZone customer service calls and the DCTA customer service calls. If you look at May, for instance, 4,000 DCTA calls, 14,000 GoZone calls. And that's a service that moves 864,000 trips a year. So it's a significant service. So again, kind of a recap on what we think might be influencing these things. We have heard from VIA staff that there is a habit of people trying to call to get a better wait time than what the app is telling them. We see more customer needs on access. That's a population that generally will pick up the phone to call. Lots of detours and service changes on the Connect service that we've seen over the course of the last year that people want to know about. And then as the A-Train ridership continues to increase, that causes people to call and ask more about the A-Train. So if we were to take that the average monthly call volume now and distribute that over the course of a day, that's what this graph is showing you here. So green are GoZone calls, blue are the DCTA calls, and you see how it's a nice bell curve on how those calls are distributed. So not a lot happening early in the morning when it's GoZone only, but then peak service on the DCTA side, the access customers are getting information or calling in about their trip for the day, trying to reschedule. And then DCTA kind of scales off over the course of the day as those trips get completed. The GoZone service obviously peaks at the middle of the day and then towards the 4 p.m. hour. And if you've used the service before, you know that your highest opportunity for seat unavailability is during that peak time. And so those call volumes trend. When Randy briefed you all back in December, she talked about how do you staff for handling this sort of call volume? And she introduced the concept of the Erlang calculator that is used in the industry to understand how many people do you need answering the phones or on staff to handle those kinds of call volumes. What this is showing you is that at peak, it's up to 13 employees. If we're staffed currently at 5, that leaves us 8 necessary. Now, the 5 that we currently have, remember, they're divided between the window and answering phones. In the future, if we make the decision to insource this, if the board makes that decision, then that might be a place where this ticket vending machine conversation also comes to bear, because perhaps you have the TVM in the lobby of the DDTC and you take the people out of the window to just answer the phone. So that's how all these things kind of begin to tie together. But let's keep the number 13, 5, and 8 in mind. This is probably easier to read on your iPad, but I want you to know that Randy's done a lot of work to actually schedule these people, these positions throughout the day. So these are our existing employees, assuming they would be answering the phone 100% of the time. And this is how the new FTEs would be lined up. And then what you see is people that are available to answer calls, A, people that are on break, B, people that are at lunch, in L. So any given time, you've got in the midday period, 5 to 11 people actively answering the phones. At peak, anywhere between 8 and 13 people actively answering the phones. And then at PM, anywhere from 4 to 6. And in the hybrid model that we've been working toward as a recommendation, VIA would be answering their own customer service calls after 7 o'clock and before 7 o'clock. And that's really the way that we have it set up today with regard to the DCTA customer service operation covers the hours of 7 to 6. This chart down below is just showing you the same thing, but in 15-minute increments. So you get a little bit more granularity if you'd like it. So what we're talking about is, of all these different call types that are currently handled by VIA, how would we propose it? Well, this would mean that the DCTA customer experience team would be handling GoZone service questions, phone bookings, ride status, and account questions. Here's one that's really important for us from a customer service perspective too. Today, when people have complaints about a driver, they contact VIA. They call the VIA customer service number. We would like to, in this new model, be able to have first cut at those. We'd like for people to be able to call us so we can log the complaint, refer it to VIA for resolution, and then see clearly what happened on the back end. I think that's a communication loop that we have today, but this would formalize it and make it, I think, drive more accountability. So another thing that we're doing to address call volumes, and another evolution we already have in the works on our DCTA customer service side, is the Ride DCTA app that you remember we launched during the Spare Labs transition last February. This allows people to book DCTA paratransit rides by the app. We took it on because the Collin County Rides program that we adopted from DART, they were doing this already. We've been doing it for our Collin County Rides customers. We've been piloting it on an individual basis with key customers on the DCTA side, have gotten really good results. And so we've soft launched that. That is allowing people to do it. And then hard launch in August is what we expect when we'll begin advertising and communicating, hey, did you know that you can book by the app? Figuring out how to get our IVR system to educate customers, maybe under our new cloud-based phone system, that while they're waiting to book a ride for access, that, hey, did you know that you can book this ride on the Ride DCTA app if you go to your app store? Those are the types of things that we can do to help drive down call volume overall. So let's look at the dollars and cents of this. We've identified 3 different scenarios that are in front of us. Scenario 1, the VIA calls remain outsourced. Fiscal 26, that customer support is going to cost $616,000. What I've learned is we're kind of unique in the VIA space, especially in North Texas. Typically, that customer service number is kind of baked into the hourly rate, and so it's not upfront and center for people. But because of the way that ours came on board, we can see it separately, which makes it really easy for us to do this analysis. But that's our number for this year. What they've given us in their proposal for their next contract is options on what it would cost to do a hybrid-based model where VIA answers the phone in the early morning and late evening, and then DCTA answers the phone during the core of the day. And that's what we're calling that hybrid option. If we were to take on that hybrid option, which we think is the right first step, then DCTA would have to hire 8 additional FTEs. Let's look at option 3 first. 8 additional FTEs under their current salary salary and benefits would be about $400,000. And VIA would charge us $215,000. So if you take 215 plus 400, you're at $615,000 versus the contract cost $616,500. It's about a wash. Now, if our employees get adjustments through an approved budget on October 1, it's going to skew the math less in favor of insourcing. One of the pieces of feedback that we got from the board also was, well, what if we didn't go all in on hiring all these people all at once, but kind of scaled our way in? That's what this analysis is, the 6 additional FTEs. The risk with this one is if we're not able to answer the call volume, we could drive a lot of complaints, and we don't want to have that. And so, but we wanted to show you what the numbers look like, and that's where you get the favorability from. This graph down here, or table down at the bottom, is showing you what we now know that the GoZone contract is in the process of being awarded, what the VIA turnkey customer service cost will be for the next 5 years of this contract. They have a 3% annual escalator. If we were to take the same escalator on their hybrid proposal, and then the assumption of our personnel cost in the long-range financial plan increases 4% year over year, you see at year 5, we're at $693 for VIA turnkey customer service, $709 for the in-source cost. At that scale, that's also basically a wash. So the question is, why or would we want to do this on insourcing if there's not a financial benefit? We think there could be upside for hybrid insourcing, that we get better support. One of the things we get complaints about is, hey, I'm calling the person, but they don't know where I am. They don't understand where I'm at in the service area. It's hard for me to understand them from a language perspective. I think it gives us a better opportunity to drive call volume reduction through education and engagement. Our customer service reps have personal relationships with a lot of the people that they serve through the phone. And we get a lot of good feedback as a result. And so I could see our customer service people saying, hey, you know, it really is better to book by the app, and trying to encourage that behavior over time. And then I think it also puts us on a path to potentially go 100% insourced in the future. That would allow us to even reduce that $200,000 GoZone customer service number in the future. So if we were to go down this path, what we'd be talking about is some board approval in the fall timeframe to go down the road. We'd be working on a transition plan. If you all approve the cloud-based phone system, we would be implementing that. We would need some time to recruit and hire FTEs and train. So that's the winter time. And then we would look at April 1st or somewhere around that mid-year mark for doing this insourcing thing. I don't think that there's not a burning platform on this. We have time to be thoughtful and considerate about how we go down the path, but it's been 6 months since we gave you an update. We've got a lot better data and we're able to understand what's happening on the service today. And so just wanted to bring this forward for your consideration.
Any thoughts other than that? Appreciate it. I mean, that's
Okay.
good options. Okay, and go ahead and item number 6. This is discuss and consider advance authority to apply for a bus and bus facilities grant through the Council of Governments. Paul's gonna kind of go over the opportunities and get our thoughts on it.
Yep.
Paul?
Yes, sir. And this is an action item that we're requesting or recommending the board approve an advanced authority for the bus facilities competitive grant program with a 15% match in the amount of $405,000 to purchase 3 35-foot diesel transit buses. I would classify this agenda item as a target of opportunity that's resulting from a notice of funding opportunity that the FTA has put on the street for federal funding of buses. In our work plan for this year, we said we wanted to make a run at a discretionary grant application, and this one has come live, and we feel like we've got enough information to throw something in. However, we do need the board to give us the authority to commit this local match so that we can be competitive. Austin talked about this fleet plan over the course of the budget discussion. Basically, between 2025, 26, and 27, we think we need to buy 3 buses year over year. We bought 3 buses with the 25 authorization. We're asking to buy 3 buses with the 26 authorization. We're asking for the $400,000 to commit to buying buses in the 2027 authorization because the federal government can pay for 85% of the cost of those buses. So you get these buses for 15 cents on the dollar if you commit these local funds and we are selected for the grant. So this is not a guarantee, but we think it's worth a shot. So the bus and bus facilities competitive program is on the street now. It's available for replacement, rehab, purchase, or lease of buses and bus facilities. And then this has also been part of the low-no emissions grant program that's encouraging transit agencies to buy low and no emission buses. What you see is $398 million available for this program where we would qualify for, $1.1 billion available for the other program. So we're competing for a smaller piece of the pie. But again, we feel like we have a good story to tell. So why are we doing this? Because it's eligible. We can buy diesel buses under this. We feel like there's a good favorable environment at the federal level to consider the purchase of diesel buses. And this is how the funding would break down. We're assuming a cost by the time we get to 2027. We have to aim high here so that we don't come in under. We're assuming a cost of $900,000 a bus. I would hope not, but right now we're under contract, or we're getting under contract for $773,000 a bus with contingency. So 3 buses at $900,000 each is $2.7 million. The 15% local match is $405,000. We'd be requesting grant funding of $2.3 million. This requires us to, and here is the breakdown of the maximum federal share for buses that are accessible to people with disabilities, and our low floor buses meet that metric. If we were going 90%, it would have to be some compressed natural gas or whatever the low emission alternative would be. So we're not there, but we feel like we fall into this category. And we know from the notice of funding opportunity that they're going to look for what's your need, what are you going to get out of this? We'll have the ability to say, hey, we're looking at considering new fixed route service in the city of Denton. We'll be able to tell our story about the data usage to drive fixed route bus planning. I think the innovation will land well. Obviously, we meet the need on local financial commitment and all that sort of thing. And so these are some of the things that we understand through webinars that the feds are looking for. How are they distributing grants across the country? Are they in large urban, small urban, rural, and tribal? We have this unique transit system serving a suburban area that we think is going to be advantageous to us as well. And then these are the things the administration's looking for. cost effectiveness, US manufacturing, families and communities. And so we want to tailor our grant application towards that. The timeline is pretty tight. The applications are due on July the 14th. We've already started working on the grant application. Obviously, we can't submit it without this board approval, and we need it this month because by the time the next board meeting comes, you all will be, the deadline will have been passed. But again, target of opportunity feels like if we can get a bus for 15 cents on the dollar, or 3 of them, that we should try. If we all agree that the fleet plan says we're going to be buying buses for the next several years. So, with that, this is our recommendation, and I'll happy to take any other questions you may have.
You have any questions, considerations? Anybody have a motion you'd like to make?
I'll make a motion that we approve the request to apply for the grant of $405,000 commitment on our part.
You have that and execute any necessary resolution. Sometimes they'll want a resolution. that
Okay.
have
Okay.
So add any necessary resolutions.
I second, including the resolution.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Proceed. Do we have anything on item 7? If not, then we'll move on. Information reports are in your package. Future agenda items and board member requests. Is there any board member request from anyone? Not the next agenda. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting is July 24th, 2025. That moves us to report on items of community interest. Does anyone have anything?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Allison?
Denton's Yankee Doodle Parade is this Saturday at 9 a.m. You can take the train. And we are having a fireworks show, actual fireworks, not drones, but fireworks on January 3rd, pardon me, July 3rd.
Great.
Oh, we don't have anything, right?
No.
Concert series over, movies in the park is over.
It was hard and full.
Okay, then. Joe, do we have an executive session? for today's meeting?
No.
Do you want one? No, no. Okay, seeing that there's no further action. It is 1:23, and I will adjourn the regular board meeting. Thank you.